Supposedly, since Xianxia had been hurt by Madame Lan, he must have lost the golden crow carcass. Most probably, Madame Lan snatched it from him. However, it wasn't easy to ask about it. Madame Lan would never tell them, and Xianxia might misunderstand them if he was asked such a question. Wei Kei shook his head and replied with a bitter smile. No matter where the golden crow carcass is, it has nothing to do with us anymore. When the golden crow divine palace appeared some time ago, he immediately realized that the issue had grown beyond their ability to interfere. Therefore, he told the disciples to return to First Inn and send a message to their headquarters. He thought that by asking all the elders from his great force to come over, they could get a share of the treasures. However, the appearance of the golden crow had disrupted his plan. This kind of prize wasn't something Great Moon Province or the other third-class forces had a right to covet. Even the second-class forces would end up in a miserable state if they decided to claim it. The only people who had a right to snatch the golden crow carcass were those first-class forces, the cave heavens and paradises. Moreover, even though those from Great Moon Province hadn't obtained many treasures on the Sun Star, it had still been a fruitful trip for them. They had obtained some Sun's true fires, including a fifth-order one, so they had basically achieved their goal. As long as they could make good use of these treasures, they could nurture a fourth-order open heaven realm master for their force. By then, the collective power of Great Moon Province would increase, and it would be worth it for Wei Kei and Tao Rongfang to have done so much. By the way, Martial Uncle, Martial Aunt. Meng Hong seemed to recall something as he cupped his fists. There's one more thing that I need to tell you. When junior brother Yang returned to the inn, he was severely injured. I wanted to help him, but he stopped me and secretly told us to pretend to not know him. Is he worried that he'd invite trouble to us? Wei Kei arched his brow upon hearing that. He secretly told you all to pretend to not know him? Yes. Meng Hong nodded. Tao Rongfang said in a solemn voice, he's indeed meticulous as he could think of such an issue in that kind of situation. It's no wonder that he had the guts to snatch the corpse in front of so many top cultivators. A puzzled Meng Hong asked, Martial Aunt Tao, you mean? Tao Rongfang explained. Just like what you've speculated, Xianxia was worried that he'd invite trouble to us, which was why he told you to pretend to not know him. After all, he has offended many great forces. If others find out he's close to Great Moon Province, we will be in big trouble. He's concerned about our safety. Old Fang frowned, but we arrived at First Inn with little brother Yang, and we stayed here together for a few months. Some people must have seen us spending time with him, so it's pointless to pretend we don't know each other. Wei Kei said, If so, the few of you shouldn't show up for the time being to prevent anyone from having their eyes on you. As long as no one sees you, there shouldn't be any problem. Old Fang and Jie Yu traded glances, and then they nodded. Yes. After they talked for a while more, Wei Kei told the disciples to return to their own rooms. When he and Tao Rongfang were the only ones left in the room, he asked, Junior sister, what do you think? Tao Rongfang replied, he's a bold yet meticulous young man. More importantly, he's a kind-hearted person with great promise. Then, she put on a helpless smile. Unfortunately, we can't accept him into Great Moon Province anymore. Wei Kei fell silent for a moment before he heaved a sigh. It seems that we share the same thoughts. This time, Xianxia had caused huge trouble, so they were not able to protect him in any way. Therefore, they couldn't take him on as a disciple anymore. It wasn't that Wei Kei and Tao Rongfang wanted to go back on their word, but as elders of Great Moon Province, they had to consider the safety of their force above all else. They very much wanted to accept Xianxia into their great force, but who could deal with the trouble that would ensue? By then, their great force would be turned upside down. He even saved our lives. Tao Rongfang stared at Wei Kei. Back in the main hall, if Xianxia hadn't warned them in time, they wouldn't even be here now. But when Xianxia found himself in trouble, they were unable to help him, which made her feel frustrated. An embarrassed Wei Kei replied, We'll try to make it up to him. If possible, we can secretly assist him to flee to a different great territory and go into hiding. That's all we can do. There's one more thing. What do you think? Wei Kei asked. Tao Rongfang gazed at him. You mean about the golden crow carcass? In response, Wei Kei nodded his head. She replied, Initially, I thought that the carcass must be in Madame Lan's hands. But now, it seems that it's possible Yang Kai still has it. A smiling Wei Kei asked, "Why do you say so?" She shot him a glare. "Senior brother? Are you giving me a test or something?" "Heh." He raised his hands. "I just want to have a chat with junior sister to see if you and I share the same thoughts." Tao Rongfang went on to say, if the carcass is in Madame Lan's hands now, Yang Kai should supposedly be free of trouble and he wouldn't have needed to secretly warn Meng Hong, however, he did so. Which suggests that there's something he's concerned about. He must be worried that he would drag the others into this mess, which indicates that the carcass might still be in his hands. Of course, we can't rule out the possibility that Madame Lan did snatch the carcass and Yang Kai was just being cautious. Wei Kei said with a smile, "Junior sister, you're indeed beautiful and intelligent." Tao Rongfang gave him a dismissive look, but she still said in a charming way, "Senior brother, do you share the same thought as well?" A frustrated Wei Kei replied, I don't even know where the carcass is now, however, wherever it is, it truly has nothing to do with us anymore." The shop boy entered the room with some food and had a drink with Yang Kai. After some time drinking and eating, both of them became tipsy. Although Yang Kai had stayed in the inn for 4 months, he had never asked the shop boy what his name was, so he usually just called him Shophand. During the chat, he finally found out his name. The shop boy's name was pretty simple, which was Bai Chi. "You must have an ulterior motive for approaching me. Just tell me what you want. Has the proprietress sent you here to pry some information out of me?" Yang Kai picked up some food and shot him a look. Bai Chi grinned and filled Yang Kai's cup with wine before replying, "Nothing of the sort. If proprietress wanted to find out more about you, she wouldn't need to do such a thing. Gathering information is our specialty, so we can find out about your background by just asking around." "What is my background, then?" Yang Kai appeared doubtful. Bai Chi stared at him. "Do you want me to say it? Come, enlighten me." After putting down the wine bottle, Bai Chi grinned meaningfully and replied, "All right, then. Your name is Yang Kai, you're a peak Emperor Realm cultivator. 1 year ago, you emerged from an unknown universe world and were brought to Seven Wonders Land by one of their protector venerables, Duan Hai. Your job was to take care of fruit trees in their fire spirit land. Half a year later, Seven Wonders Land was invaded by their enemies, and amidst the chaos, you fled from that place and brought 3 people, 1 man and 2 women, with you. They're Fang Bai Chi, Dieyu and Ah Sun. Am I right?" Yang Kai stared at him with widened eyes. How many informants does Firstin have? Firstin was able to find out so much about a nobody like him, which went to show that this great force was truly powerful and had a vast network of influence. Bai Chi grinned. "I also know that you've condensed your wood element." Yang Kai narrowed his eyes. "What else?" "You snatched a precious treasure from in front of several dozen open heaven realm masters and led them on a wild chase for days." "Ahaha." Yang Kai forced a smile and secretly heaved a sigh of relief as Firstin apparently couldn't find out everything in this world. At the very least, they hadn't figured out his relationship with Old Su and what order his wood element was. The things they knew about him were all general and superficial. With that said, they had already gathered so much information about him in very short order. "Tell me what happened on the Sunstar and how you obtained the Golden Crow carcass. Just ask your proprietress about it." "What's the point of asking me?" Yang Kai was exasperated at the mention of the Golden Crow carcass. If the proprietress hadn't intercepted him at the last moment, he would have safely returned to the inn instead of getting struck by her palm. "Proprietress has been in a terrible mood since she returned. She'll beat me black and blue if I ask her about it." Bai Chi's expression appeared bitter. Yang Kai wanted to ignore him at first, then he recalled something and said, "There's one thing I don't understand. If you can answer my question, I don't mind telling you what happened on the Sunstar." A vigilant Bai Chi narrowed his eyes. "What do you want to know?" Yang Kai went on to say, "Don't worry. It shouldn't be a secret, but if it is, you can choose not to answer." Bai Chi nodded. "Go ahead." Yang Kai said through clenched teeth, "I shook off your proprietress in a faraway place, and I was certain that even though she is a 6th-order open heaven realm master, it would be impossible for her to catch up to me in time. However, how did she manage to return to the inn before me and even waited in the dark to capture me?" That was the question that had been troubling him for days. Unless the proprietress also had something like a space beacon, he couldn't come up with any reasonable explanation. Bao Qi was elated upon hearing that. That's your question? You know the reason behind it? Bai Qi couldn't help but start guffawing as he repeatedly slapped the table. Did you have nowhere else to go? Which was why you wanted to seek refuge in First Inn? You thought that by entering the inn, no one would dare to make a move on you again. Was that why you rushed to our inn after getting rid of proprietress? Xianxia nodded as that was what he thought. After all, he indeed had nowhere else to go at that time, as First Inn was the only safe place for him. Ha 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 ha. Bai Qi doubled over with laughter as tears almost streamed out of his eyes. Xianxia stared coldly at him as he had the urge to fish out his azure dragon spear to deliver a fatal strike. Bai Qi seemed to have detected Xianxia's murderous intent, which was why he quickly suppressed his laughter and took a sip of the wine before asking, "Have you heard of the universe transference law?" Universe transference law? Xianxia frowned. What's that? He had never heard of it before. But judging from Bai Qi's expression, he reckoned that the reason the proprietress was able to return to First Inn before he did and lay in ambush had something to do with this universe transference law. Bai Qi explained, the 3,000 worlds is incredibly expansive, so it's not easy to go from one location to another even for high-rank open heaven realm masters. Cultivators like us shouldn't waste time simply traveling back and forth between distant places because, if we have the time, we should use it to cultivate our secret techniques and secret arts instead. The universe transference law was created for this reason. This secret techniques only use is to cross vast distances. For example, there's a universe transference seal in First Inn with proprietress imprint sealed inside. As long as she's in this great territory, wherever she may be, she can return to First Inn in an instant by using the universe transference law. A dumbfounded Xianxia said, is it so amazing? He couldn't help thinking this technique was similar to a space beacon. The location of every space beacon was a destination, and with a flash of thought, Xianxia could move to the location of any space beacon, so it worked in a similar way as the universe transference law. A space array worked in the same way, however, in comparison, a space beacon was more convenient than a space array, while there were advantages and disadvantages when compared to this universe transference law. It's truly amazing, Bai Qi chuckled. With a dark expression, Xianxia said, so, Madame Lan made use of the universe transference law and returned to First Inn before I did. It was then he came to the realization that, while he thought he had made an intelligent move in Madame Lan's eyes, he was just walking right into her trap. At that instant, he felt frustrated. Fortunately, he managed to keep the golden crow carcass. Otherwise, he would have spat blood. I'll give you one more piece of information for free. Bai Qi looked smilingly at him. In the 3,000 worlds, there are many places called universe temples. Basically, each great territory has a universe temple, while some even have more than one. After spending some open heaven pills, one can record their aura in those temples, and then use them as destinations for the universe transference law. So, they're just like space arrays. Xianxia's eyes brightened. Bao Qi replied with a smile, you're not wrong to say that. However, there's a limit as to how far a space array can send a person, while the universe transference law is different. As long as you're strong enough and your destination is in the same great territory, you can reach the universe temple where you've left behind an imprint. Hearing that, Xianxia nodded his head. It's really convenient. I'll visit those temples if there's a chance in the future. Which great force do these temples belong to? Bai Qi explained, no one. The universe temples were jointly built by the 36 cave heavens and 72 paradises. Therefore, disciples from at least one cave heaven or paradise will stand guard at every universe temple. No one can cause trouble inside those universe temples, otherwise it'll be seen as provoking all the cave heavens and paradises. A shocked Xianxia said, the universe temples were jointly built by the cave heavens and paradises? After giving it a thought, he realized that it wasn't so surprising. Others wouldn't be able to set their minds at ease if the temples were controlled by just one great force, and no single great force was able to control such an important asset. Therefore, it was reasonable that the temples were jointly managed by all 36 cave heavens and 72 paradises. Judging from what Bai Qi had said, it seemed that if Xianxia came across any trouble in the future, he could seek refuge in one of the universe temples. Now, tell me what happened on the Sun Star. Since Yang Kai had agreed beforehand, he wouldn't go back on his word now. And so, he told Bai Qi what he had gone through on the Sun Star. Bai Qi widened his eyes and appeared amazed. He wasn't surprised at the fact that Yang Kai was able to conceal himself in front of so many open heaven realm masters, as only a suitable artifact was needed to achieve that. Instead, he was more interested in finding out how Yang Kai managed to escape the pursuit of so many masters. However, Yang Kai just gave him a vague answer that he was an expert in the Tao of space, and he was especially adept at running away. It wasn't a secret anyway. When he was hunted down by Madame Lan and the others, he had used instantaneous movement several times. After a long time, a drunk Bai Qi muttered, "Let's call it a day. I have work to do now. You should be careful, as we have had many customers recently. I guess they're here for you." Yang Kai watched him leave. Then he appeared crestfallen. Following that, he opened his 6 Fated Paths bag and saw that the golden crow carcass was still inside it. Although he had snatched this hot potato, he had no idea how to handle it now. Whatever the case, the treasure was worth a lot of money. At the very least, it could make up for the 2 golden tail feathers from Miameng that he had lost. If the treasure couldn't be sold directly though, he would just trade it for a 7th Order Sun's true gold, which was what he originally wanted. When he managed to condense his fire element, no one would make a move on him again. Furthermore, he couldn't possibly hide inside this room forever. Although he still had some open heaven pills, they wouldn't last forever. After pondering on the issue for a moment, he rose from his chair and pushed the door open before shuffling downstairs. Following that, he swept a glance over the hall and realized that the place was bustling. Initially, there were only 7 or 8 tables, but now there were over 10. However, more tables were needed as the hall was packed with people. Bai Qi was moving around with dishes in his hands when he saw Yang Kai and asked in shock, "Why did you come down here? Why can't I come down here?" Yang Kai scoffed. After he finished speaking, the entire hall fell silent as everyone turned to look at him. At the same time, they rudely scanned him with their divine senses. At that instant, Yang Kai felt like he was a white sheep that had accidentally entered a wolf's den. All his bodily hair was standing on end as he lost any sense of security. Bai Qi gave him a thumbs up in appreciation of his guts before continuing on with his work. Yang Kai looked around and saw some familiar faces. Except for Madame Lan, all the other mid-rank open heaven realm masters who had chased him down before were sitting in the hall. The hall was filled with divine senses as these ill-intentioned people stared fixedly at Yang Kai. Although the place was completely silent, everyone could feel that a storm was brewing. The weaker cultivators couldn't help but gulp as they turned to look at the door, as though they were preparing to flee at any moment. Just as the hostility intensified, a door on the 2nd floor suddenly opened as Madame Lan stepped out of a room and swept a glance over the crowd with her alluring eyes. Staring at Yang Kai, she snorted and leaned against the railing. Following that, she fished out what seemed to be seeds and started snacking on them. Yang Kai grinned, knowing that since Madame Lan had appeared, no one would dare to make a move on him. Madame Lan must have detected the hostile atmosphere, which was why she made an appearance to calm everyone else down. The hall was crammed with people, so there were no empty tables. Yang Kai looked around and shuffled towards a table. 3 people had been seated at this table. One of them was a handsome young man, and the other 2 people were old men with profound auras. There was also an alluring woman in revealing clothes who was standing behind the young man. A group of disciples were lined up behind the elderly men. Obviously, they were from the same great force. The young man wasn't powerful as he had only condensed his Tao seal. On the other hand, the old men were open heaven realm masters. The young man was disdainfully gazing at Yang Kai when the latter sauntered towards him, causing the former to frown as he had no idea what Yang Kai was up to. "Hello, we meet again. What a coincidence." Yang Kai flashed a smile at him. "If you don't mind, why don't I join you?" Without even waiting for approval, Yang Kai directly took a seat across from him. The young man appeared dumbfounded and asked, "Who are you?" A passionate Yang Kai replied, "It seems that brother has been busy. We met each other when we were heading to the Sun Star. Don't you remember?" He wasn't spouting nonsense as they had really met before. At that time, Yang Kai, Jieyu, and the others were heading towards the Sun Star when a ship came at them from behind and almost injured them. After that, This very young man returned with his ship and invited Diayu and Ah-sun to board. However, Yang Kai turned him down. At that time, he had no idea which great force they were from, but after going through the jade slip given to him by Meng Hong, he realized that they were from a place called Perpetual Province. Upon Yang Kai's reminder, the young man said, "It's you." Then his face fell. "Who allowed you to have a seat?" "Go away." An unperturbed Yang Kai chuckled. "There's nowhere else I can have a seat. There's an empty seat at your table anyway, so why can't I join you?" "Don't be so petty." Just when the young man wanted to say something, he felt that something was off, as there were some divine senses scanning him. Turning his head, he realized that all the mid-rank open heaven realm masters were staring at him with doubtful gazes. The young man's face turned ashen, as he had no idea why he had attracted so much attention all of a sudden. The other two old men realized that something was amiss, and one of them hinted at the young man with his gaze, while the other gaped at Yang Kai and said grimly, "You can have the table. We'll take our leave." Following that, he rose from his chair. The young man seemed reluctant to leave, but he was dragged away by the other old man. Without the intention to stay there, they paid the bill and stepped out of First Inn. A moment later, the young man was standing on a ship as he asked with a dark expression, "Who was that guy?" The two old men traded glances. Then one of them replied, "Young master. He was the one who snatched the golden crow carcass." The young man was stunned. "What?" "He was the one who took the carcass and safely returned to First Inn." "That's right. He's that guy. Why should we be afraid of him?" the young man bellowed. Yang Kai only sat at the same table, but they immediately left the inn as though they were afraid of him, which made the young man feel quite embarrassed. One of the old men shook his head and said, "We're not afraid of him, but we don't want to be dragged into his mess. The golden crow carcass is immensely important, and First Inn will soon fall into a state of chaos. We'd better stay out of it." The other old man nodded. "That's right." The young man sported a gloomy expression. Despite knowing that they were right, he still felt unresigned. Knowing what was on his mind, the first old man said, "Young master, don't worry. That brat's days are numbered." The young man asked, "What do you mean?" The old person sneered. "He's trying to cause turbulence when he's so weak. He's bound to go to hell." Right after those from Perpetual Province left, Yuan Xiaoman whooshed towards Yang Kai and took a seat on his left before looking smilingly at him. Yang Kai called out to Bai Qi and pointed at the finished dishes in front of him. "Take them away and prepare new dishes." Bai Qi glared at him, as they had just had a chat over a drink in his room. Just when he thought they were friends, Yang Kai bossed him around like he was an ordinary shop hand, which was intolerable. Nevertheless, he had no other choice, as that was indeed his job. After taking the finished dishes away, he stepped into the kitchen and told the chef to prepare some dishes. Meanwhile, 3 more people rose from their chairs. One of them was a burly old man whose face radiated a pinkish glow. Another was a cold-looking man in tight-fitting clothes, and the last person looked like a scholar with an elegant fan in his hand. Following that, they shuffled towards Yang Kai and took a seat at the same table. Presently, all 4 mid-rank open heaven realm masters were staring fixedly at Yang Kai. Honestly speaking, he did feel pressured, but he wasn't afraid of them. The proprietress was gazing at them from the 2nd floor, so no one would dare to make a scene here. Knowing what Yang Kai was doing, Madame Lan sported a gloomy expression. However, in order to protect her business, she wouldn't allow the reputation of First Inn to be spoiled. "Little brother, you're really something." Yuan Xiaoman was the first one to speak. She seemed interested in Yang Kai as though she had just found a new toy. "No one could have expected that you'd return to First Inn safely." Yang Kai gazed at her with a tilted head and took a brief look at her plump chest before grinning. "What's your name?" "Yuan Xiaoman." Following that, she pointed at the others and introduced them to Yang Kai. It was only now that he learned the names and backgrounds of these people who had been chasing after him for days. "Little brother, are you interested in joining Mirror Flower's Watermoonland? It's obvious that you're new to the outer universe, and it's hard for a newcomer to gain a footing here. Life will be easier if you have some support." A curious Yang Kai asked, "How do you know I'm a newcomer?" Those from First Inn could find out about his background because their job was to gather information, but it was unlikely that Yuan Xiaoman could do so as well. Moreover, he didn't think he had accidentally exposed anything. Yuan Xiaoman covered her lips and giggled sweetly. You didn't even know about the universe transference law and you walked right into a trap by coming to first in. Do you even dare to deny that you're a newcomer? Yang Kai's expression darkened when he heard that. It was definitely the biggest humiliation in his life and a taint in his cultivation journey. When he was in Seven Wonders Land, no one had told him about the universe transference law, so he wasn't aware of its uses and mysteries. When he saw Madame Lan outside the inn some time ago, he even thought she was her twin sister. All of a sudden, the chubby old honk snorted, "Brat, I only have a question for you and you'd better answer me honestly. Otherwise, you'll bear the consequences." Yang Kai shot him a look. "Save your breath. I won't tell you anything. You court death." Old Hong bellowed. Hearing that, Yang Kai landed a slam on the table and stood up straight before glaring at him. "I dare you to make a move on me then." A shocked old Hong stared at him with widened eyes as he had never expected that Yang Kai would react in such a way. At that instant, he was rooted to the spot and felt slightly embarrassed. On the second floor, the proprietress, who was munching on some strange seeds, gnashed her teeth together as she stared resentfully at Yang Kai, knowing that he was regarding her as a safety charm. No one would dare to make a fuss in first in. He must be fully aware of it, which was why he had the gall to confront old Hong like this. Otherwise, as an Emperor Realm Junior, he wouldn't have the guts to do such a thing. To the side, Yuan Xiaoman parted her lips in shock, while Zhang Qi and Ji Tianxing were astonished as well. In the dining hall, the low-rank Open Heaven Realm Masters all gave Yang Kai an admiring look. "Shut your mouth if you don't dare to make a move." Yang Kai took a seat again and shouted at the kitchen. "Are my dishes ready? What's taking so long?" Bai Qi could be heard saying, "The dishes will be ready soon. Stop urging us." Old Hong was so enraged that his face turned pure crimson, and there seemed to be some steam billowing from his head. After taking a deep breath, he said grimly, "Brat, you've got guts, I'll give you that. This old master advises you to stay in first in forever, otherwise, I'll rip you into 10,000 pieces." He was truly incensed as Yang Kai had embarrassed him in front of so many people in the hall. He had never been humiliated in such a way before. Yang Kai was unperturbed as he had already offended the old man before, so he wasn't worried about displeasing him one more time. Zhang Qi frowned as he had seen through Yang Kai's temperament. Thus, he summoned a space ring into his hand and pushed it towards him before saying, "Little brother, this king also has a question for you." A surprised Yang Kai gave him a strange look. Although he couldn't be certain what was inside the space ring, he reckoned that there could possibly be open heaven pills. Could he also sell information now? An elated Yang Kai took the ring and scanned it with his divine sense. Upon releasing that there were 10,000 open heaven pills inside, he grinned from ear to ear and nodded, "Sure. Sure." At that instant, he thought that a fourth-order Open Heaven Realm Master was indeed generous as Zhang Qi directly gave him 10,000 pills. Although the pills were only equivalent to 10 days' worth of lodging fees at this bandit's inn, it was still a substantial amount. Zhang Qi put on a smile, and just when he was ready to speak, Yang Kai raised his hand to stop him and turned to look at Yuan Xiaoman and Ji Tianxing. "Do you have any questions as well? This is your only chance. By the way, I'll only answer the question of the one who will offer the highest bid, and I'll only answer one question. So, you'd better decide what it is you want to know most." At that instant, the corners of Zhang Qi's brow twitched. Ji Tianxing and Yuan Xiaoman were also struck speechless. As fourth-order Open Heaven Masters, they were not the most powerful people out there, but they were some of the most famous figures in the neighboring Great Territories. However, on this day, they were led around by the nose by an Emperor Realm brat. Old Hong sneered, "Boy, it seems you've been unlucky lately, and it looks like you will fall into danger soon. Shut up. This is none of your damn business." Yang Kai growled, "Stay away from me." Then he turned to look at Ji Tianxing and Yuan Xiaoman. "Are you sure you have no questions for me? In that case, I'll answer Senior Zhang's question now." Ji Tianxing and Yuan Xiaoman traded glances before gritting their teeth. However, they indeed had a question they had to ask. So despite the fact that they were reluctant, they still tacitly fished out a space ring. Yuan Xiaoman put on a smile that wasn't a smile and asked, "Little brother, aren't you worried that you'll be burned by the hot potatoes you're about to take?" Yang Kai immediately snatched the ring from her and sneered, "I've taken hotter potatoes, so why should I be afraid now?" Hearing that, Yuan Xiaoman was rendered speechless. After giving it a thought, she realized that since Yongkai had the guts to snatch the golden crow carcass right in front of so many open heaven realm masters, why would he be afraid to take their space rings? Obviously, he was someone who treasured money more than his own life. After scanning the rings, Yongkai became ecstatic. Then he gazed at Ji Tianxing. Senior Ji has offered the highest bid. Good. What is your question? I'll tell you everything I know. Hearing that, Zhang Qi and Yuan Xiaoman turned to stare at Ji Tianxing. An unfazed Ji Tianxing secretly spoke to Yongkai via divine sense. Where's the golden crow carcass now? Yongkai was startled upon hearing that. Although he knew that their questions must be related to the golden crow, he hadn't expected to hear this kind of question. He almost spurted out that the carcass was in his hands, but was the question even necessary for them to know that? However, he soon realized something and became astounded. The fact that the carcass was in his hands was only known to the proprietress and him, while all others could only guess. At that time, no one else was outside First Inn. They only knew that he had fled to the inn and was intercepted by the proprietress outside the building before being wounded. However, if he thought about it from the perspective of an outsider, he would have speculated that the carcass might have been taken away by Madame Lan. After all, given his strength, it should be impossible for him to escape or outmaneuver a sixth-order open heaven realm master. It should have been a simple matter for Madame Lan to snatch something from him. Upon that realization, he finally understood why Ji Tianxing had asked this question. Apparently, Zhang Qi and Yuan Xiaoman had the same question. It was all because they still hadn't figured out where the golden crow carcass was. Many ideas flashed across Yongkai's mind as he pondered on the pros and cons of every one of them. And after just a short moment, he pounded the table furiously and jumped to his feet. With a face twisted in anguish and unwillingness, he pointed at the proprietress on the second floor and screamed, "It's her! Her! She snatched the treasure I spent so much effort to obtain. Those from First Inn oppress me because I'm the weaker one. This is a bandit's inn. A bandit's inn, I say." His roar reverberated around the hall as everyone could hear his accusation that was filled with blood and tears. Following the direction he pointed, they turned to look at the proprietress. A dumbfounded Madame Lan's jaw dropped as a seed slid off her red lips. A moment later, she clenched her teeth and bellowed, "Smelly brat, you must be sick of living." Although she didn't hear what question Ji Tianxing had asked, she had guessed it without the need to actually hear it. He must be trying to find out the whereabouts of the carcass. Yongkai's accusation at this point had dragged her into this mess, and it was pointless for her to deny it. Judging from the gazes of those people in the hall, she knew that they already had the speculation, and it was proven by Yongkai at this moment. Hence, there was no way she could clear her name. It wouldn't have mattered if she had really seized the carcass. But the problem was that even though she had made a move, Yongkai pulled a trick on her and managed to sneak into First Inn. Instead of getting any benefits, she had invited trouble to herself. She was so incensed that flames nearly shot out of her eyes. She had never seen a man as vile and shameless as Yongkai before. If she could, she would have made him feel regretful of the fact that he was ever born right this instant. Nevertheless, she was the proprietress of First Inn and she had an obligation to protect the inn's reputation. "Proprietress, why are you showing such thick murderous intent? Do you want to silence me by murdering me?" Yongkai bellowed. "Shut your mouth." Madame Lan was so infuriated that she hurled the snacks in her hand at him. "You may be able to silence me, but you can't silence everyone here. Justice lies in everyone's heart, and the heavens see all we do." "Proprietress, you'd best watch yourself." Madame Lan's chest heaved heavily as she felt her blood boiling. She clenched her fists so hard that her knuckles started turning pale, but still she took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She had the urge to go downstairs and rip this little brat's mouth off. "The dishes are ready. The dishes are ready." Just then, Bai Qi dashed out of the kitchen with some dishes and a jug of wine in his hands. Upon entering the hall, he immediately realized that there was something off about the atmosphere, which caused him to be rooted to the spot. Looking around, he didn't understand what was going on as all he could see was that the proprietress' face had turned livid as she was standing on the second floor. Her eyes were closed, and her curvy figure was trembling. Then he walked up to Yongkai and asked in a hushed voice, "What happened?" A storm is coming, Xianxia replied and took the dishes from his hands. Then he turned around and shuffled towards the second floor. Since he had stirred up some trouble, he reckoned that he'd better leave now and go somewhere safer. Upon returning to his room, he closed the door and activated the barrier. Unable to hold it in anymore, he started laughing. Although the proprietress had been treating him well, she had indeed made him waste a golden tail feather from Yemeng. Moreover, she had injured him before. Now that there was a chance, he certainly had to get his revenge. Furthermore, in that kind of situation, diverting the attention to the proprietress was his best option. Then he took a seat at the table and drank some wine. Just when he was pondering on his future, he suddenly heard a loud bang as the door was kicked open. A shocked Xianxia leapt to his feet and turned around before bellowing, "Who? Who has the guts to make a move in first in? Is this person sick of living?" However, when he saw who it was, his neck immediately shrank. That was because the person who had kicked the door open was none other than the first-in proprietress, Madame Lan. A cold aura could be seen swirling around the proprietress as she stepped into the room. With a sneer on her face, she stared fixedly at Xianxia. Then, she slightly lifted her foot and closed the door behind her. "And Madame Lan?" Xianxia slowly stepped backwards as his back soon came into contact with the wall. Looking around, he realized that there wasn't even a window in the room, which made it impossible for him to flee. He also didn't even think about using instantaneous movement, as he wouldn't have a chance to do so in front of a sixth-order open heaven realm master. "Ahem. How may this junior help you, Madame Lan?" A horrified Xianxia stared at the front as his heart leapt to his throat. He secretly decided that if Madame Lan made a move against him, he would immediately use his dragon transformation secret technique to warn her off. Madame Lan sneered, "Don't worry, I won't kill you. If I do that, I will never be able to clear my name." Upon hearing that, Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief, but all of a sudden, Madame Lan said dispassionately, "Just because I won't kill you, though, doesn't mean I can't beat you up. Brat, are you prepared?" Xianxia gulped. "Madame Lan, let's talk it out instead of resorting to violence. Moreover, we're in first in and I'm a paying customer. You're the proprietress here, so is it appropriate for you to harm your customer?" "It's not appropriate." Madame Lan stepped closer to Xianxia and soon reached him, and he caught a whiff of her alluring fragrance. Then, she said through clenched teeth, "But this queen will never soothe the rage in her chest if she doesn't beat you black and blue. Don't you care about the inn's reputation anymore?" Xianxia still tried to step backwards, but his back was already firmly pressed against the wall, so there was nowhere else he could go. "Don't ever think of restraining me with the inn's signboard. I don't care what you say." Madame Lan balled up her fists as her knuckles cracked. Her malevolent aura seemed able to swallow the entire world, and after she finished speaking, she extended her fist towards Xianxia's left eye at the speed of lightning. With a loud boom, Xianxia felt his vision darkening as all he could see were stars. Even his mind had plunged into chaos. The proprietress had exerted quite some force with her fist, which almost knocked Xianxia out. But before he even came to his senses, she extended her fist towards his right eye, whereupon a loud boom was heard again. Xianxia instinctively covered his head and curled up in the corner. As he bore the proprietress' fists and feet, he secretly swore that he would get his revenge one day. She went on to beat him for quite some time. It felt like an instant and a year all at once. Upon realizing that the proprietress had stopped attacking him, Xianxia turned his head slightly and looked through his fingers, only to see the proprietress panting with her hands placed on her hips. With a pleased expression, she said, "Cool? Smelly brat, you'd better behave yourself from now on." Upon finishing her words, she turned around and left. Xianxia cursed at her before flopping to the ground, unable to move. Outside the room, Bai Qi watched the proprietress leave and stealthily looked around before entering the room. After closing the door, he walked up to Xianxia and crouched down to gaze at him with a sympathetic look on his face. "Proprietress really went hard on you. It seems that she's completely incensed." "I've never seen her blow her top in such a way before." A paralyzed Xianxia felt that some of his bones had cracked. Although Madame Lan really didn't intend to kill him, she had exerted a lot of force with her beating just now. He had only just recovered from his previous injuries, and now he was wounded again, which was why he was quite sullen. "Are you going to just keep staring?" Xianxia shot a glare at Bai Qi, who had crouched down in front of him. Or are you going to help me up? Bai Qi replied with a grin, I would have helped you up if someone else had beaten you. However, it was proprietress who had made a move. So I wouldn't dare to lend you a hand. If she finds out about it, she'll fire me. What are you doing here, then? Xianxia glowered at him. Bai Qi said, I'm just here to watch a good show. TSK. Brat. Since you've offended proprietress, you'll surely have a hard time in the future. Scram! Xianxia bellowed. He didn't need Bai Qi to tell him that his life would be difficult from now on. The proprietress had even disregarded the reputation of First in just to vent her anger on him. So it wasn't hard to imagine that life would be like a living hell for him soon. With a grin, Bai Qi got up and said, Since you still have the energy to chase me away, it seems that you're all right. Take a rest now and call me if there's anything you need. Then he turned around and left. Xianxia was so exasperated that his lungs almost exploded. Once he could move a little, he felt his entire body aching. After lying on the ground for 6 hours, he climbed onto the bed with difficulty and recuperated in silence. However, it seemed his previous act had proven useful. After the incident, everyone's attention had been diverted to the proprietress. Although his tone and movements were a little exaggerated at that time, any reasonable person would believe that Madame Lan had snatched the golden crow carcass and kept it. After all, there was a huge gap in strength between Xianxia and her, and since she had made a move, there was no way she hadn't achieved her goal. The next day, there was an elderly man who was seated in a room that belonged to Great Moon Province. Wei Kei and Tao Rongfang were standing in front of him as they reported to him what had happened recently. The elderly man kept silent, only nodding from time to time. A while later, Wei Kei said that was what had happened. Leader, what do you plan to do? The elderly man was none other than the province master of Great Moon Province. Previously, Wei Kei told Meng Hong and the others to return to First Inn and send a message to their headquarters. Upon receiving the message, this elderly man brought some people with him and set off to help Wei Kei and Tao Rongfang. Although they had come as quickly as they could, they only arrived at the inn today. The province master nodded. Both of you have done well. As long as we make good use of the treasures you acquired, the power of our force will significantly increase. Although they hadn't managed to obtain any Sun's True Gold, they had gotten several Sun's True Fires, one of which was 5th order. Therefore, it had been a fruitful trip for them. Normally, it was difficult for a great force like Great Moon Province to even obtain a single 4th order material, let alone a 5th order one. By selling the 5th order Sun's True Fire, they could purchase some 4th order materials and attempt to nurture a 4th order Open Heaven Realm disciple. The prerequisite was that this disciple had to be gifted, and they would need to spend a lot of time to achieve their goal. Both of you have earned the greatest merit for this operation. Wei Kei replied, Many thanks for your compliment, Leader, but we only managed to escape from death's door because of someone's warning. Oh, the elderly man arched his brow. You have to return the person's favor then. Who was the top master that had saved you? Wei Kei said, He isn't a top cultivator. It was a brat called Xianxia. Hearing that, the elderly man frowned, the boy that everyone has been talking about because he has snatched the golden crow carcass? Indeed. The elderly man nodded and gently tapped the table as though he was pondering on something. A while later, he said, I've heard that the carcass has fallen into Madame Lan's hands. That's what that boy said. The elderly man stared at Wei Kei and asked, What do you want to do? Wei Kei replied, If possible, I hope you'll accept him into our great force. He's new to the outer universe with no one else to rely on. More importantly, he is a kind and righteous person. On top of that, he has saved my and Junior sister's lives. Now that he's in trouble, we can't just stand idly by. The province master heaved a sigh. I knew you were going to say that. However, do you realize just how much trouble he's in now? If we take him in, what kind of consequences will we suffer? Wei Kei cupped his fists. I've thought this over thoroughly. However, since the carcass isn't with him now, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter? Boss looked straight into his eyes. Do you even believe what you've said? Wei Kei parted his lips, but he couldn't say anything in the end. That was because he indeed didn't believe what he had said. The elderly man went on to say, He said that the carcass is in Madame Lan's hands now, but it is a rare treasure, so anyone who is interested in it won't let go so easily. By then, Countless top cultivators will interrogate Yang Kai and even scour his soul. By then, are we even going to be able to protect him? If we try, we will fail. And if we don't, it will disgrace and dishonor us. Then he waved his hand. We can't accept him. Otherwise, our great force will surely descend into chaos. Leader. Wei Kei became flustered. Say no more. The elderly man interrupted him. We shouldn't stay in this place any longer. Pack up now and follow me back to Great Moon Province. Wei Kei and Tao Rongfang traded glances. Since the province master had made a decision, it was useless for them to say anything else. In light of that, they simply heaved a sigh. They knew that the leader's decision was right, and they shared the same thoughts as well. However, they still felt frustrated. As for the favor you owe, you can try to come up with a way to compensate him, the elderly man said. Wei Kei cupped his fists. Yes. In his room, Yang Kai was sitting across from Wei Quebec. Tao Rongfang was standing behind Wei Kei as she stared at the battered Yang Kai with a sympathetic look on her face. Normally, if she saw a man in such a state, she would have burst out laughing. That was because the large dark circles around Yang Kai's eyes looked quite amusing, obviously caused by fists. The symmetrical dark circles around his eyes suggested that his attacker was also quite powerful. However, she wasn't in the mood to laugh now. After all, Yang Kai had saved their lives before. At the thought of Yang Kai's future and the possible blaming from Ah Sun, she felt dejected. An embarrassed Wei Kei spoke for a long time before he was able to make things clear to Yang Kai. Scratching his head, he said, Yang Kai, this is how things are now. Initially, we intended to bring you to Great Moon Province so that you could join us. However, it seems that we can't do that now. Leader has rejected the idea, so there's nothing this way can do. I'm sorry. After he finished speaking, he cupped his fists and looked away as he was too ashamed to face him. Yang Kai chuckled. Many thanks for your kindness, Senior Wei. I'm fully aware of the situation I'm in, so it's understandable that your leader has rejected the idea. Even if he had agreed to it, I couldn't have followed you to Great Moon Province as I can't leave first in or I'd be ripped into pieces. There's still a chance for me to survive if I stay here. Tao Rongfang said, You're right to say that, but it's not like you can stay in this forever. What's your plan? Yang Kai narrowed his eyes and fell into his thoughts for a moment, then he shook his head. I'll see how things go. I don't have any plans in mind now. Hi. Wei Kei sighed. You're just too reckless. Why did you even decide to snatch the golden crow carcass at that time? It was said that men die for wealth just as birds die for food. What Yang Kai had done in the Golden Crow Divine Palace was no different from digging his own grave. Without first in, he would have lost his life a long time ago. An embarrassed Yang Kai replied, I didn't have much time to think about it. I just did it on impulse and it's pointless to talk about why now. He waved his hand as he wasn't willing to dwell on this topic. Seeing that, Wei Kei decided to change the topic. We'll be leaving first in and returning to Great Moon Province soon. Is there anything we can help you with? After giving it a thought, Yang Kai said, There's indeed one thing that I need you to help me with. Name it, Wei Kei replied. Yang Kai said, Old Fang, Dieu, Sun, and I fled from Seven Wonders Land and went through a lot of hardships. Now that Sun has been taken on as a disciple by Senior Tao, I don't have to worry about her anymore. However, Old Fang and Dieu have nowhere else to go. Given the situation I'm in, they shouldn't have anything to do with me anymore, so I hope that you'll accept them into your force so that they'll have a place to live and grow. Wei Kei replied, Even if you didn't mention it, we'd still do so. Don't worry. We'll bring Fang Baiqi and Dieu back to Great Moon Province and take care of them. As long as this Wei is still alive, I won't let anyone oppress them. Many thanks, Senior. An abashed Wei Kei waved his hand. Don't thank me. Otherwise, I'll be too embarrassed to face you. What about you? Tao Rongfang asked. Is there anything we can help you with? Yang Kai shook his head as they were truly unable to help him solve the problem he was facing. Now that Old Fang and Dieu finally had a place to call home, he could at least set his mind at ease about that issue. After a sigh, Wei Kei fished out a space ring and put it in front of Yang Kai. It's just a small gift from me, so please don't refuse it. You'll need money to stay in first in after all. After deliberating on it for a moment, Yang Kai decided to keep the ring. Wei Kei was a straightforward man, so he would only make it difficult for him if he turned him down. They went on to chat for a bit before the pair rose from the chairs. Before leaving, Wei Kei said, "Do you want to see Fang Baiqi and the others? After all of you part ways this time, you won't be able to meet up again for a long time." Yang Kai replied with a smile, "We'll certainly meet again in the future. Senior Wei, please leave with them now. It would be sorrowful to part ways with them, so he'd rather not see them now." Wei Kei stared at him for a moment and patted his shoulder, "Take care." Then he turned around and left. Tao Rongfang nodded at Yang Kai and shuffled out of the room. A short while later, footsteps could be heard coming from the corridor. Yang Kai knew that those from Great Moon Province must be leaving. After all the sound of feet died down, Yang Kai returned to his bed and meditated to recuperate. Recalling his experiences since he left the star boundary, he felt crestfallen. After separating with Zhang Ruoxi, he ended up becoming a worker in Seven Wonders Land. He went through countless difficulties to escape from that place, but he was then dragged into a mess because of the Golden Crow carcass soon after. As an Emperor Realm cultivator, he was caught in the middle of a great storm in the outer universe. If he wasn't careful enough, he would be ripped into pieces at any moment. He had to ponder over how to handle the carcass. Not only did he have to deal with the situation swiftly and to his benefit, he also had to ensure he would not leave behind any hidden dangers for himself. This thorny issue gave him a severe headache. It was all calm for the next few days. Yang Kai had been worried that the proprietress might find fault with him again, but he hadn't seen her for days now. On the other hand, most of his injuries had healed. However, after the previous incident, he wouldn't dare to leave his room as he pleased. If there were any reckless people who ignored the inn's rules and made a move against him, he wouldn't be able to resist. 10 days later, Yang Kai and Baiqi were having a drink in his room. While Baiqi was talking about what had been going on outside, the door was suddenly kicked open. A shocked Yang Kai raised his head before shrinking his neck. Turning to look at Baiqi, he asked mournfully, "Are there any privacy measures in place in your inn at all? Do you allow your customers' doors to be kicked open at any moment?" Baiqi simply gave a hollow laugh. "Well, she's the proprietress." With a gaze filled with coldness, Madame Lan shot Baiqi a glare. "It's no wonder I didn't see you at all. It turns out you've been lazing around here. Don't you need to serve the customers? How dare you slack off here? I'll deduct a year's worth of your salary." Baiqi turned pale in an instant and pleaded, "Proprietress, please calm your anger. I'll start working now. Please don't deduct my salary." Upon finishing his words, he dashed out of the room. With his back leaning against the wall, Yang Kai wanted to flee as well, but when the proprietress shot him a glare, a chill shot up his spine and he became rooted to the spot. Then, she slightly extended her foot backwards to close the door and took Baiqi's previous seat. With a gaze filled with gloom, she stared fixedly at him. Yang Kai forced a wry smile at her as he curled up in the corner. Then he covered his head with his hands and said, "Just don't hit my face." It took a few days before the dark circles around his eyes caused by her faded. This woman was ruthless, so he had to be careful. The proprietress said grimly, "Sit." Yang Kai stole a glance at her before sitting on the ground. The proprietress bellowed, "Smelly brat. Stop playing meek. I told you to sit, so sit." After batting his eyes, Yang Kai got to his feet and inched closer to the chair in a vigilant manner. Then he slowly took a seat, his eyes darting around as he was apprehensive. Seeing how alert he was, an incensed Madame Lan landed a palm on the table. "Brat, do you know how much trouble you've caused me?" Yang Kai scratched his nose as he muttered, "Not really. I've only heard a little about it." Recently, he had been hearing from Baiqi about what had been going on outside his room as he hadn't dared to leave it. He only knew that most people from the neighboring great forces had left. After all, the people who had checked in previously were mostly from third-class forces, so they had no right to compete for the Golden Crow's corpse. Just like Great Moon Province, they knew their place, so they had left as quickly as they could. Of course, there were still some of them who had stayed here to watch the show. After they left, those from second-class great forces subsequently arrived. Even some from the first-class cave heavens and paradises had come to this place. Presently, over 20 mid-rank open heaven realm masters had gathered in first in along with 3 or 4 high ranks. It could be said that this was the first time they had received so many top cultivators since First In's opening. They were all attracted by the Golden Crow carcass. Madame Lan sneered, Did you seriously think you'd be fine by just shifting all the attention to this queen in the hall the other day? Do you think they're all fools? Both of us are fully aware whether the carcass is in my hands or not. Xianxia replied, I was left with no other choice? Madame Lan landed another palm on the table. Do you think you could lie to everyone else just because you were left with no choice? Do you think I can't kick you out of the inn right now? You don't need me to tell you what will happen then. A stunned Xianxia questioned, Madame Lan, do you want me dead? Madame Lan fiddled with her own fingers and replied dispassionately, I have a right to get my revenge. You were the one who framed me first. Xianxia became truly flustered. If he were chased out of the inn, he would lose his life the next moment. With widened eyes, he rebuked, Your inn is open for business and I've fully paid for my lodging. How can you just chase me out? Madame Lan lifted her head to give him a look. You're right. We have never mistreated a customer before. If I kick you out, our reputation will be tarnished. With his heart pounding against his chest, Xianxia let out a long breath. Then Madame Lan said, But there are exceptions for those who can't pay their fees and refuse to leave. Xianxia's eyes widened as he had a premonition. As expected, Madame Lan went on to say smilingly, This queen has decided that from today onwards, the fee for your room will be 100,000 open heaven pills per night. 100,000? Xianxia's expression cramped drastically. After calculating for a bit, he realized that the pills he had could only last him 3 to 4 days. Enraging him, Proprietress, you're oppressing me. Madame Lan replied, You have no right to interfere in my decision. It's up to me whether I want to raise the fee, and it's up to you whether you want to continue staying here. No one is forcing you to do anything. Xianxia demanded, I want a different room. Madame Lan scoffed, There are no other rooms. Our inn is packed to the brim right now, so you can't get a new one. Xianxia gnashed his teeth together and glared at her. However, an unfazed Madame Lan kept a charming smile on her face as she fiddled with her own fingers. She didn't even spare him a glance. Suppressing his urge to land a fist on her face, Xianxia asked, What do you want? Just say it. Madame Lan replied impassively. Smelly brat, an ordinary man is innocent, but treasures make him guilty. Haven't you heard of that before? Certainly, Xianxia had heard the saying. In fact, he was intimately familiar with it. Since he started cultivating, he had come across countless dangers because of this exact scenario. Therefore, he understood the meaning of the saying better than anyone else. Good, this queen was caught off guard and framed by you, so now many people out there believe that the golden crow carcass is in my hands. Madame Lan gazed at him. In that case, I don't mind making their speculation a reality. Why don't I take the trouble from you now? What do you think? Xianxia asked, You want me to give you the carcass? Madame Lan replied, I won't take it from you for free. I'll give you enough compensation. After giving it a thought, Xianxia asked, May I know what the compensation is? With a smile, Madame Lan stuck out one finger. The first compensation is simply open heaven pills. This number. Then, she swayed her finger at him. 10 million. Xianxia was stunned. In response, Madame Lan nodded her head. Xianxia said, Madame Lan is indeed generous. 10 million open heaven pills was really a large number, tempting for any Emperor Realm cultivator. Since you've mentioned the first one, there must be a second option. What is it? Madame Lan shot him a look. The second option is a full set of 5th order Yin, Yang, 5 elements materials to help you break through to the 5th order open heaven realm. That was another tempting offer. A 5th order set of materials could be traded for 7.5 million open heaven pills. However, considering the rarity of such items, it would actually be equivalent to 10 million open heaven pills. Moreover, a 5th order open heaven realm master could be considered a powerhouse in the outer universe. It was in the middle of the mid-rank open heaven realm. Duan Hai was only a 4th order, while both Qi Qiao Heavenly Monarch, whom Xianxia had never met, and Old Su were 5th order. In other words, a 5th order cultivator was powerful enough to gain a footing and build a great force in the outer universe. Madame Lan was indeed sincere, but that was the reason Xianxia realized that the golden crow carcass was far more valuable than he thought. Otherwise, she wouldn't have decided to pay such a hefty price to obtain it. The carcass must be worth a lot more than the compensation she had offered. Is there a third option? He asked. A frustrated Madame Lan said, Aren't you satisfied with 2 options? Brat, don't be too greedy. Xianxia raised his hands. I was just asking. Don't get mad. Then, he hurriedly filled her cup with tea to prevent her from blowing her top again. After a snort, Madame Lan took a sip of the tea and shot him a look. You should count your blessings. Countless newcomers like you struggle for hundreds or even thousands of years in the 3,000 worlds without achieving anything. You got some luck not long after you arrived at the outer universe. Many people would die of jealousy if they heard. What she had said reminded Yang Kai of Diayu and Old Fong. It had been a long time since they arrived in the outer universe, but they had been trapped in Seven Wonders Land for practically all that time, which was why they hadn't even ascended to the open heaven realm. In comparison, Yang Kai was in a much better spot. With that said, the reason he had the options to choose from on this day was that he had risked his life to achieve this. It had nothing to do with luck. Thus, he took a sip of water and fell silent for a moment before replying, Proprietress, I'm tempted by both options, but I'm not sure what to choose. Madame Lan said, Do you want my advice? Yes, please. If I were you, I'd choose the second option. Although open heaven pills are beneficial, it's not safe for you to carry so many pills around as you're only an Emperor Realm Junior. Moreover, you don't have the means to buy higher-order materials. So, you should just let First In purchase those fifth-order materials for you and enjoy the fruits of our labor. You have a point. Yang Kai crossed his arms and fell into his thoughts. The proprietress observed him and gently let out a breath. Judging from his expression, she knew that there was a chance to achieve her goal. If he wasn't even willing to talk to her, there wouldn't be any hope. It seemed that he had also realized that the potato was too hot for him to handle. The golden crow carcass was a ticket to hell for an average person, but to a great force like First In, it was an invaluable treasure. As long as she could secure the corpse, she wouldn't mind paying a big price. While Yang Kai was pondering on the issue, she didn't disturb him. However, 1 hour later, he still hadn't made up his mind. Seeing this, she was speechless as probed. Have you made your decision yet? Yang Kai knitted his brows together as though he was in a dilemma. Hearing her voice, he turned to look at her. Proprietress, I'm fine with the options you've mentioned, but can you also compensate for the loss of the 2 Miemeng golden tail feathers? At the mention of the golden tail feathers, Madame Lan became indignant as Yang Kai had used one of them on her when she was unsuspecting, which caused her to be wounded. She had never been humiliated in such a way before. Do you even want me to compensate for that? Are you out of your mind? Madame Lan barked. Yang Kai replied, Of course you have to. In order to snatch the carcass, I had to use 2 of Mia Meng's golden tail feathers. Although I don't know how much they're worth, they're obviously not cheap. If I sold them, many people would want them. Perhaps they could even be traded for 10 million open heaven pills. Since that's the value of 2 golden tail feathers, the offer you've mentioned can only make up for a fraction of my losses. Upon hearing that, Madame Lan put on a sneer. Just when she wanted to mock him, she recalled how the golden tail feathers were powerful enough to even harm her, making them practically invaluable safety charms. If they were sold, they really could be worth a lot of money. The generous ones might even be willing to offer him 10 million pills. Thus, she changed the topic by saying, Now that you mention this, there's a question I need to ask you. Where did you get those Mia Meng golden tail feathers from? If she were aware of them in the first place, she wouldn't have suffered such a setback. Yang Kai grinned. I also have a question for you. Why don't we trade information? Madame Lan sized him up. What do you want to know? In a stealthy manner, Yang Kai uttered in a hushed voice. What are the uses of the golden crow carcass? Why do so many people want it? Madame Lan questioned. Why are you asking this question? I'm curious. Yang Kai stared fixedly at her. After giving it a thought, Madame Lan replied, Since so many people want it, it naturally has its value. It's difficult to look for a golden crow. Throughout the 3,000 worlds, there are only a small number of them. This kind of ancient beast is born with a sun and perishes with that sun, so it is truly an amazing being. Its flesh can be made into pills, and its bones can be used to forge artifacts. Most importantly, the golden crow's true fire in its body is invaluable. If anyone is able to refine it, they will gain an extremely powerful fire element. This wasn't secret information, so Yang Kai could find out about it by simply asking around. Thus, she didn't hide it from him. Yang Kai's gaze brightened when he heard that. You mean the black flames we saw in the Golden Crow Divine Palace? He had seen how horrifying the Golden Crow true fire was. Any low-rank cultivator contaminated by it died. That's right. Madame Lan nodded and sneered. Brat, I suggest you give up even dreaming about it. Golden Crow's true fire is so terrifying that without a strong enough wood element to suppress it, you'll be burned to death by just absorbing a wisp of it. Xianxia appeared grateful for her warning. Certainly I wouldn't be reckless. Good. Now tell me where you obtained the golden tail feathers from. Xianxia grinned. Of course they were gifted to me by Mia Meng. Some time ago, I lent her a hand, and in order to thank me, she gave me 3 golden tail feathers before leaving. Madame Lan didn't seem to believe him, but she wasn't willing to dwell on this issue. In an impatient manner, she said, Enough idle chatter. Have you made up your mind? Xianxia replied, Stop pressuring me. I won't know what to choose if you do that. Why don't you go back to your room first? I'll keep on thinking it over. When I've made a decision, I'll inform you. After he finished speaking, he rose from the chair and walked up to the door. Then, he opened the door as though he was ready to see her off. Madame Lan was dumbstruck by what he had said. However, as a woman, it was inappropriate for her to insist on staying in a man's room. Gritting her teeth, she got up and walked out, but as she was passing by Xianxia, she extended her leg from her dress and landed a kick on his shin before shuffling out of the room. Xianxia grimaced in pain as he hugged his leg with both hands and jumped around for a long time. At the same time, he secretly cursed at this woman for being so violent. A moment later, he closed the door and turned on the barrier. Then he sat down on the bed with his legs crossed and snuck into the sealed world bead. It was completely serene inside the sealed world. Upon landing on a flatland, he fished out 6 Fated Paths bag and shook it, upon which the golden crow carcass dropped on the ground. Since he obtained the carcass, Xianxia had never carefully examined it. Upon learning the uses of the carcass from the proprietress, though, he couldn't help but feel tempted. He had never expected that the true fire within the golden crow carcass could be used to condense the fire element. In fact, this was exactly the kind of treasure he had been trying so hard to find. The reason he went to the Sunstar was to hunt for a 7th-order sun's true gold. Although he had seen a number of such sun's true golds, they ultimately didn't end up belonging to him. The carcass he had accidentally snatched, however, had given him a new option. Madame Lan had warned him against having his eye on the golden crow's true fire, as he wouldn't be able to suppress this kind of fire without a strong wood element. However, that was basically not an issue for him. Xianxia had no idea what order the wood element which he had condensed from the essence of Immortal tree was, but he reckoned that few if any other treasures in the world comparable to it. The wood element within his body was certainly strong enough to suppress the golden crow's true fire. Nevertheless, in order to be safe, Xianxia decided to test it out first, which was why he had snuck into the small sealed world. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to take the risk with so many top cultivators currently staying at First Inn. That was his initial plan at least, but as soon as the carcass was released, Xianxia immediately felt the entire small sealed world descending into chaos as its world principles began to warp. The sealed world seemed to be on the brink of exploding. Xianxia was the master of the small sealed world, so he was especially sensitive to the changes it was going through. It was like a big stone that had been forcefully stuffed into a glass of water, which caused the glass to crack. The sudden change in the small sealed world shocked Xianxia. Instantly, many ideas flashed across his mind, and he soon realized the reason behind this phenomenon. The capacity of the small sealed world was limited, similar to the theory of the world bottle in the star boundary, where only 10 great emperors could exist at the same time. There would never be an 11th great emperor because this was how the world protected itself, an innate restriction related to the strength of the world principles. There was a limit in the capacity of the world bottle in the star boundary, and it was the same case for small sealed world. Furthermore, small sealed world wasn't comparable to the star boundary at all. Simply put, the small sealed world couldn't hold a powerful being like the golden crow carcass. The carcass alone was able to destabilize the small sealed world, so if a living golden crow entered the small sealed world, Xianxia reckoned that it would be burned down in an instant. The small sealed world was no longer the same as it was in the past because the 2nd region and the 3rd region had been separated from it. Now, only the original 1st region was left, so its capacity was rather limited. That was the reason the sudden change took place when Yang Kai took out the carcass inside of it. Upon understanding this, Yang Kai hurriedly opened the 6 Fated Paths bag and put the carcass inside it. It was only then that the world stopped shaking and became calm again as the chaotic principles began mending themselves. The change proved that his speculation was right. With a frown, Yang Kai fell into his thoughts on the same spot. If he hadn't put the carcass into the small sealed world on a whim, he wouldn't have discovered this. The carcass alone was able to make the small sealed world descend into chaos, so what if he put an open heaven realm master into the small sealed world? An open heaven realm master contained a complete world within their body. Depending on the order the master was in, the power of the small universe world in his body also varied. Yang Kai reckoned that if the capacity in the small sealed world was larger than that of the small universe in an open heaven realm master, there wouldn't be a problem. However, if it was smaller, such a change would happen to the small sealed world again. At the thought of this, Yang Kai came to the realization that he shouldn't put an open heaven realm master in the small sealed world as he pleased. Otherwise, he might suffer immense losses. The small sealed world couldn't even bear it, so nothing need be said about the world beads he refined as imitations of the sealed world bead. World beads weren't even comparable to the sealed world bead because they were refined from dead stars and asteroids which didn't have any world principles of their own. Yang Kai reckoned that a world bead he had made couldn't even accommodate the weakest of open heaven realm masters. If such a person was forcefully kept inside the bead, it would instantly explode. Therefore, it seemed that the 6 Fated Paths bag was indeed extraordinary. It was a storage artifact, but it could forcefully keep an open heaven realm master inside of it. Unlike the small sealed world, what was inside the 6 Fated Paths bag wasn't a sealed world but an adjustable space. Yang Kai wondered who created this bag and how it ended up in old Su's hands. However, all that didn't matter anymore as the bag belonged to him now. Since he couldn't test out his theory in the small sealed world, Yang Kai decided to leave. After storing the sealed word bead, he plunged into the 6 Fated Paths bag. Fortunately, he had fully refined the bag, so the space inside it could be adjusted accordingly. Although it wasn't as spacious as the small sealed world, it didn't feel cramped for him to stay inside with the golden crow carcass. The golden crow was imposing when it was still alive, but there didn't seem to be anything special about it after its death. After releasing his divine sense, Yang Kai could sense a faint ferocious aura wafting from it, but that was all. Next, he circled around the carcass several times before standing in front of it. With his arms crossed, he attentively examined the carcass. Yang Kai wasn't sure how he should start. One of the reasons he could condense his wood element was that he had already refined the Immortal tree, and Zhang Ruoxi had given him some guidance, so the process was rather smooth. Now that he was alone with no one else to rely on, he didn't know what to do. After pondering on the issue for a long time, he decided to simply try things out first. According to the proprietress, the golden crow's true fire was truly horrifying, so Yang Kai was especially careful. First, he extended his hand and pressed it against the golden crow's forehead. With his eyes closed, he tried to sense it in silence and draw out the true fire inside. Initially, nothing happened, but soon Yang Kai felt a scorching heat on his palm. An aura that seemed able to burn down everything in existence came right out of the carcass. At the same time, he had a feeling that he was standing right in front of a great sundae. The scorching power seemed able to melt him at any moment. Yang Kai's expression changed as he hurriedly stepped backwards, but his hand was already engulfed in a dark flame. The smell of burned flesh permeated the air, and a piercing pain caused him to groan like a wounded beast. Yang Kai hurriedly circulated his Emperor Qi in an attempt to stop the black flame from expanding, but was stunned to realize that his Emperor Qi had simply turned into fuel for the fire. As his Emperor Qi surged, the black flame became even more vigorous as it soon reached his elbow. Upon seeing that, Yang Kai was shocked. Although he was fully aware that the golden crow's true fire was extraordinary, he realized now that he had still underestimated its power. At that instant, he felt remorseful and seriously wondered if he would be burned to death today. At the critical moment, though, he suddenly recalled what the proprietress had said. Only a strong wood element could suppress the golden crow's true fire, so he hurriedly drew out the power in his Dao seal. A green aura exuded from his arm in the next moment and met with the black flame, making for an extremely bizarre sight. The power of the immortal tree was indeed incredible, and as soon as his wood element was activated, Xianxia immediately felt that his pain had been alleviated and his wounded flesh was slowly being restored. Xianxia let out a sigh of relief as he knew that he had made the right move. The order of his wood element must be higher than that of the true fire. Otherwise, things would have gone badly for him today. Now, it seemed that as long as his wood element was strong enough, he could safely absorb the true fire to condense his fire element. As he thought about the issue, Xianxia wondered how many people there were in the world that possessed such a strong wood element. Even if there were such people, their wood element was certainly not comparable to the essence of the immortal tree. With his mind at ease now, Xianxia sat down with his legs crossed and carefully engulfed the golden crow's true fire with his wood element before leading it to his Dao seal. After an hour, the originally green Dao seal was now tinged with a black hue. From the black light, Xianxia could feel a sense of ferocity and an aura that seemed to want to cause destruction. Next, he checked the stability of his Dao seal, and upon realizing that it was completely safe, he became elated. It seemed he would have no trouble refining the golden crow's true fire to condense his fire element. Furthermore, he could clearly feel that the true fire was 7th order at the very least. He had never come across other 7th order materials before, but he had seen a 7th order sun's true gold in the Golden Crow Divine Palace. The aura of the 7th order sun's true gold from back then was even weaker than the Golden Crow's true fire, which gave Xianxia a rough estimate of the true fire's potential. It had only been a year since he arrived in the outer universe, but he already had a chance to refine his fire element. It could be said that he was extremely fortunate. Xianxia stopped thinking over the options the proprietress had given him and instead recalled Xianxia saying that everything else, be it money, women, or status, came second to personal strength. It was extremely difficult to find materials that were 7th order and above, and since he was an ambitious man, Xianxia was determined to make it to the high-rank open heaven realm in a single bound. Now that the chance was right in front of him, he would not let it slip through his fingers. In fact, he wasn't really tempted by the offers the proprietress had provided him in the first place. Even if she could give him an even greater offer, he would rather give all that up in order to condense his fire element. In just a short moment, the wood element had restored the wounds caused by the Golden Crow's true fire. So Xianxia took a deep breath and pressed his palm against the Golden Crow's carcass. Then, he activated his Dao seal and drew the true fire into his body again. After the dark flame was drawn out, it engulfed Xianxia's arm. However, thanks to the suppression of his wood element, the flame couldn't harm him one bit. Half a day later, Xianxia reluctantly left the 6 Fated Paths bag. It wasn't that he had finished condensing his fire element, but rather that he couldn't possibly accomplish this in one go. Moreover, he had absorbed enough of Golden Crow's true fire on this day to feel bloated, so he needed to refine it before he could continue. Also, he was worried that the proprietress would barge into his room all of a sudden. If she found out that he had been secretly absorbing the true fire, she wouldn't let him off. For the next few days, the proprietress would visit him regularly to discuss the carcass. Xianxia didn't intend to pass it to her now, so he would appear tempted for a while before chasing her away. Nevertheless, he could feel that the proprietress' patience was running out. For the past 2 days, she had appeared disgruntled when discussing the issue with him. Every time before she left, she would land a kick on Xianxia's shin, and since he wasn't nearly strong enough, he was unable to dodge the attack despite knowing it was coming. Xianxia was fairly quick when it came to absorbing the Golden Crow's true fire, as with the protection of the wood element from the immortal tree, he could practically devour large amounts of true fire without worry. If anyone else had witnessed this, they would surely be astonished. In the entire outer universe, no one could condense such a violent flame element in such a short period of time. They would need to spend a few years or even decades to slowly tame and then refine it in order to achieve this. Without the wood element from the immortal tree, Xianxia wouldn't have dared to be so reckless. It was only thanks to the tree's power that he could absorb the amount of Golden Crow's true fire in a day that others would take a few months to. As time passed, a fact gradually became clear to him. At his current speed, it would take him another 10 days to fill his Dao Seal's requirement. By then, He wouldn't need to absorb the true fire anymore, as he would have enough to condense his fire element. 10 days were the key to his success. However, the proprietress had become impatient, so she clearly wouldn't give him so much time. Fortunately, the proprietress would visit him at roughly the same time every day, so his secret hadn't been exposed yet. On this day, Xianxia leapt out of the 6 Fated Paths bag before the proprietress' arrival. 1 hour after he started meditating, he could hear someone knocking on the door. Apparently, it must be the proprietress again. A helpless Xianxia got to his feet and opened the door, only to see the proprietress standing outside the room demurely. What surprised him was that she wasn't alone this time. She had brought someone with her. Standing in front of Xianxia was a slim yet energetic-looking elderly man. He was clad in a short-sleeve shirt and a pair of short pants. With his bony arms and calves exposed, he looked like an ordinary farmer who had just returned from his field. However, Xianxia could see that the elderly man had a deep and profound gaze. It was as though he would plunge into it and be drowned in it forever if he stared too long, causing his chest to tighten as he realized that this elderly man was no ordinary master. Madame Lan, who had been harassing him recently, stood 3 steps behind this elderly man as she stared at Xianxia while gritting her teeth. "Little friend, do you mind having a chat with me inside?" the elderly man asked with a smile. Despite his gentle tone, he gave off an imposing air that made it impossible for Xianxia to refuse. Only a person who had been in a position of authority for a long time could give off this kind of feeling, and Xianxia was familiar with that. Xianxia shot a glance at the proprietress, knowing that he couldn't reject, before nodding and stepping aside to allow the elderly man to pass. The elderly man thanked him and shuffled into the room, followed by Madame Lan. After closing the door, Xianxia turned to look at Madame Lan and asked doubtfully, "Proprietress, this is?" With that said, he already had a speculation about the elderly man's identity. A solemn Madame Lan replied, "He is the owner of First Inn." The elderly man smiled and nodded his head. "My surname is C2, and my given name is Kong." His identity was just as Xianxia had expected. The moment he saw the proprietress, who was a 6th Order Open Heaven Realm Master, standing respectfully behind this elderly man, he could already figure out his identity. Upon Madame Lan's introduction, he knew that his speculation was right. C2 Kong was the owner of First Inn, who always remained behind the scenes. This man must be a high-rank Open Heaven Realm Master, though Xianxia wasn't certain what order he was in. Junior Xianxia greets Senior C2. "Please forgive me for any disrespect I have shown." Xianxia cupped his fists before gesturing politely. "Please have a seat." C2 Kong nodded and directly took a seat while Madame Lan took up a spot behind him. "Have a seat as well." C2 Kong looked around before motioning to Xianxia. Naturally, Xianxia didn't dare to sit. Even a 6th Order Open Heaven Realm Master was standing, so he had no right to be seated. As such, he told the elderly man that he wouldn't dare show such brazenness and was fine with standing. C2 Kong didn't dwell on the issue and simply continued, "This old master has heard about what happened to you. Little friend, do you know how many top masters have gathered in Mayan now?" Junior is unaware. Xianxia shook his head. He wouldn't have been surprised if C2 Kong directly asked for the golden crow carcass, so what the latter had just said baffled him. C2 Kong went on to say, "There are 32 mid-rank cultivators, and excluding this old master, 5 high-rank Open Heaven Realm Masters. Over 20 first-class and second-class forces are now represented here." Xianxia was dumbfounded upon hearing this number, knowing that things had truly become serious. So many high-rank cultivators had come to this tiny inn, which showed just how attractive the golden crow carcass was. After a pause, C2 Kong went on to say with a smile, "Do you understand why First Inn can do business here peacefully?" A puzzled Xianxia asked, "What does senior mean?" C2 Kong explained lightly, "Some time ago, you tried to divert everyone's attention to Xiao Lan by saying that she had taken the carcass from you. Whether or not it was true, everyone would try to ascertain the truth. Xiao Lan is from First Inn, so they wouldn't dare to make a move against her, as they have to show adequate respect to us. So, the best way for them is to pry the information out of you to find out where the carcass truly is before coming up with a plan. However, you've stayed here for quite some time, but have you ever been harassed by anyone?" No, Xianxia shook his head as he could somewhat grasp what the elderly man was trying to say. In a probing manner, he asked, "Does senior mean I've been protected by Firstin?" C2 Kong didn't directly answer his question as he continued, "Some of those out there are righteous, while some of them are wicked, however, none of them are easy to deal with." Naturally, C2 Kong was implying Firstin had been extremely accommodating to Xianxia. At this point, the proprietress spoke, "Xianxia, although Firstin is fairly powerful, we can't possibly offend so many people for you. Whether or not you will sell us the carcass, you must give us an answer now." Xianxia looked up at her and asked, "Can you give me more time to think it over?" The proprietress frowned. "What else is there to think over?" Xianxia braced himself and made an attempt. 10 days. "Please give me 10 more days. After that, I'll give you an answer you can accept." The proprietress shot him a glare. "No. We can't possibly wait for 10 more days. Do you know how much pressure we've been under because of you? We've already offended many people by fending off those who've tried to look for you. Too much can happen in 10 days. It was pointless for the discussion to go on if Xianxia couldn't stall for more time. He reckoned that he would need 10 more days to condense the fire element, and by then, the carcass would be useless to him. 3 days, C2 Kong suddenly said, "This old master will give you 3 more days to think it over." After finishing his words, he didn't give Xianxia a chance to speak as he rose from the chair and left directly. This was his ultimatum. Xianxia pleaded with them from behind, "Proprietress, senior, please extend the deadline for me. I might not be able to make up my mind in just 3 days." The proprietress turned around and snapped, "Then focus on your own safety, and I'm sure you'll be able to make a sensible choice." Having said so, she slammed the door shut as though she wanted to lock Xianxia inside. After they were gone, Xianxia appeared crestfallen. There was no way he could condense his fire element in just 3 days. However, since they had given him the ultimatum, there was no room for negotiation. 3 days later, his life would be turned upside down. Now that he was tight on time, Xianxia didn't dare to waste any time despite his worries. After turning on the room's barrier again, he plunged into the 6 Fated Paths bag. For the next 3 days, Xianxia repeatedly entered the bag to absorb the Golden Crow's true fire, not even caring if he was overburdened. Although he had sped up his progress, more time was still needed to fill up his Dao seal. After 3 days, the proprietress stepped into the room again. This time, C2 Kong didn't come with her, which was expected. Although the Golden Crow carcass was priceless, it was just material in the end. As a high-rank open heaven master, he had shown enough regard for the carcass by coming all the way here in person, so the proprietress could handle the rest. Inside the room, the proprietress stared at Xianxia and declared, "Owner has said that if you can give me the carcass, our 2 offers will not change and will even grant you both at the same time. In addition, before you enter the 5th Order Open Heaven realm, we will ensure your safety so that no one can harm you." The benefits had more than doubled for Xianxia just like that. Previously, although the offers given by the proprietress were attractive, Xianxia could only choose one of them, which didn't seem generous enough. Now, he could get both offers at the same time. Honestly speaking, any Emperor Realm Master would have agreed to it when tempted in such a way. However, Xianxia had already made a resolution that he wanted to become a high-rank Open Heaven Realm Master, and he had discovered that he could absorb Golden Crow's true fire. That was the reason he didn't agree. Now, a bright future was within his grasp. If he agreed to this deal at this point, he would lose an opportunity to reach the peak of the martial Dao. He didn't want to regret a rash decision on this day in the future. "I believe no other great force can provide you with such offers. Smelly brat, if you still refuse, I'll have no other choice." Xianxia replied, "I can feel how sincere Firstin and Senior C2 are, but enough of this nonsense. Just tell me whether you agree or not." The proprietress cut him off as she was fed up with his stalling. There was apparently no room for discussion as she appeared determined. Xianxia clenched his teeth and said, "Good, I agree." Madame Lan was startled for a moment before she became elated. "Good. It seems you do know your place. But, can you give me a few days more?" Her face fell as she examined him doubtfully. "What are you up to? Since you've agreed already, why do you want to wait for a few days more?" "I can't tell you because it's a private matter," Xianxia said calmly, which infuriated her. "However, I can assure you that I'll give you the carcass after that." He thought that he could stall for more time by saying so. But Madame Lan shook her head decisively. "Even if we can wait, others aren't so patient. She gave him a meaningful look. "You'd better prepare yourself." Then she turned around and left. Yang Kai chased after her and called out from behind, but she didn't respond to him. Right after he stepped out of the room, he froze on the spot because, at that instant, dozens of powerful divine senses locked onto him, creating a pressure like several worlds were piling on top of him, making him feel small and insignificant. Yang Kai shuddered and hurriedly returned to his room. After a gulp, he still appeared to be reeling from shock. Recently, he had been hiding inside his room, so although he knew that many top cultivators had gathered together outside, he never understood just how serious the situation was, as he had never seen them. It wasn't until this moment that he realized what it felt like to be surrounded by so many top masters. In this situation, he could only be safe by staying inside his room. It was too dangerous outside. While he was lost in his thoughts, he suddenly felt that something was off. After looking around, he almost couldn't stop himself from cursing. That was because the barrier around his room had been deactivated. Obviously, it was Madame Lan's doing. Normally, he could use his room token to control the barrier here, but as the first in proprietress, Madame Lan naturally had the ability to interfere, and of course she could override his commands. In other words, since Madame Lan had turned off the barrier around his room, he could not turn it on again. Right after the barrier lost its effect, he could feel dozens of divine senses targeting him. Without the protection of the barrier, those divine senses penetrated the room and thoroughly examined him. At that instant, he felt cold all over his body, and all his bodily hair was standing on end. With a creak, the door was pushed open as a burly-looking young man appeared at the door and grinned at Yang Kai. A horrified Yang Kai called out nervously, "Who are you?" The young man entered the room without any hesitation, a thick demon chi swirling around him, which made him look extremely wicked. In an impassive manner, he said, "You don't have to know who this king is. I'll only ask you one question, so you'd best be honest with me." Without a pause, he went on to say, "Is the golden crow carcass still with you? Or has Madame Lan snatched it?" This was the question everyone was trying to figure out. It was difficult for them to pry the information out of the proprietress, so Yang Kai could be the point of breakthrough and it was easier to make a move on him. However, Yang Kai had been sheltered by Firstin previously, so they couldn't interrogate him. Now that Firstin had made their stance clear, they had no more worries. Certainly, Yang Kai wouldn't give him an honest answer. However, just when he was pondering on whether he should lie, he realized that he couldn't even have that idea. The young man in front of him, who was surrounded by demon chi, seemed able to see through his thoughts, making it impossible to deceive him. Was this the pressure from a high-rank open heaven realm master? When Yang Kai faced Situ Kong, the latter didn't give him this kind of pressure. However, in front of this young man, he realized that even breathing seemed to be a luxury. Cold sweat streamed down his forehead as he turned to look at the young man with difficulty. There was a faint smile on the young man's face as he gazed dispassionately at Yang Kai. It was as if a giant ferocious beast was behind him, ready to gobble him up at any moment. Yang Kai's entire body trembled and his bones cracked as he was engulfed in the aura of death. "I'll die." The murderous intent wafting from the young man made Yang Kai realize that if he couldn't provide a satisfactory answer, this guy would make a move on him. At the most critical moment, Yang Kai had no other choice as he roared and snuck into the 6 Fated Paths bag. He didn't have a choice as he wouldn't dare to expose the sealed world bead, and it was useless to use instantaneous movement. By hiding inside the bag, he could stand a chance to catch his breath. However, what he had done was no different from a turtle hiding inside its shell or drinking poison to quench his thirst. The moment Yang Kai disappeared, the young man arched his brow and cried out, "The golden crow!" Following that, he extended his hand towards the bag. As soon as the bag was opened earlier, he could detect the golden crow's aura, which immediately made him realize that the carcass was still in Yang Kai's hands. He was swift, but other people's movements were even quicker. While the bag was still in mid-air, the shadows of several hands appeared out of thin air as they too reached for it. The young man cackled, "What a shameless bunch!" Suddenly, his demon chi surged and exploded outwards, causing the furniture in the room to turn into dust. The young man shot forward like a flood dragon that had dashed out of the ocean. Hong hong hong! World force clashed as many top cultivators traded moves in the void at that instant while grunts could be heard from time to time. Following a loud crash, the inn, which had stood in the void for thousands of years, collapsed. Dozens of figures shot out in different directions, all of them descending into an intense battle as they showcased their secret techniques and divine abilities. With a livid expression, Madame Lan was hovering somewhere in the void as she gazed at where the inn formerly stood. Gritting her teeth, she held Bai Qi in one hand and the accountant in the other hand as a cold aura swirled around her. Bai Qi opened his mouth so wide that a fist could be stuffed into it. The incident happened so suddenly that he had yet to come to his senses. It wasn't until this moment that he exclaimed, "Proprietress, they've destroyed our inn." The accountant widened his eyes. What should we do? Since First Inn's inception, no one had dared to make such a scene here. Those who had the guts to do so were all killed afterwards. However, the people making a fuss here were different. Some of the great forces they represented weren't afraid of First Inn at all. The inn was practically gone for good as no one would compensate them in any way. After all, the owner of First Inn had also made a move. "Smelly brat. I'll skin you alive for this," Madame Lan said through clenched teeth. If it weren't because Xianxia kept hiding the carcass from them, the inn wouldn't have suffered such a calamity. If he had given up the carcass earlier, none of this would have happened. Now that things had become serious, no one knew how to handle the situation. 6 high-rank open heaven realm masters were trading moves in the void as the 6 fated paths bag flew back and forth amongst them. Even Madame Lan couldn't interfere in a battle of this level, so she could only watch from afar. The mid-rank cultivators from the second-class forces were doing the same. After some of them suffered serious wounds while attempting to snatch the bag, they all backed off. Knowing that the golden crow carcass would eventually fall into the hands of one of those high-rank masters, they stopped wasting time and energy. Even though the carcass was invaluable, it was still not worth risking their lives for. Meanwhile, Xianxia, who had been hiding in the bag, was having quite a peaceful time. Although the high-rank cultivators' moves were world-shaking, they still tried their best to protect the bag. That was because they knew that if the bag was destroyed, the carcass inside it would most likely be lost to the void. By then, it would be impossible for them to look for it. Xianxia secretly opened a gap and released his divine sense to scan the surroundings, but before he could detect anything, he felt an excruciating pain in his head as his divine sense was shredded by the violent force. At that moment, he seemed to have caught a glimpse of the top master's trading moves. Upon seeing that, he was dumbfounded. Earlier, he was forced to sneak into the bag because he was threatened by that young man with thick demon chi, and he had no idea what happened next. He reckoned that the top masters in the inn must have started trying to snatch the bag. Xianxia wondered whose hands the bag would fall into in the end, and what his end would be. At this point, he secretly hoped that Si Kong could get his hands on the bag. At the very least, Si Kong seemed to be a reasonable person who was willing to negotiate with him. On the other hand, demon chi could be seen swirling around the young man, so it was apparent that he was a malevolent fellow. If he managed to snatch the bag, Xianxia expected his end to be miserable. It was impossible for Xianxia to leap out of the bag now, as the mere fallout from the ongoing battle would be enough to vaporize him. As he heaved a sigh, Xianxia felt a throbbing headache. He wasn't used to this feeling of leaving his life at the mercy of others. However, he was still far away from the open heaven realm as he needed to gather the power of the Yin-Yang 5 elements first. All of a sudden, an idea crossed his mind as he realized that the man that was surrounded by demon chi could possibly come from Myriad Demons Heaven. Duan Hai had mentioned that Myriad Demons Heavens was one of the 36 cave heavens, which were the top great forces in the outer universe. Xianxia also wondered if Emoshang had originally come from Myriad Demons Heaven. While he was deep in his stray thoughts, Xianxia suddenly turned his head and stared fixedly at the golden crow carcass, whereupon a crazy glint flashed across his eyes. With these high-rank masters trying to snatch the bag, it would surely take them a long time before a winner emerged. For a battle at this level, it might even take a whole year before the dust settled. That was enough time for Xianxia to condense his fire element. At the thought of this, he became elated. Previously, he had attempted to stall for more time, but the proprietress didn't give him a chance. The light at the end of the tunnel came into sight in the most unexpected way. In fact, he wouldn't need such a long time. Just 5 or 6 days was enough for him to fill up his Dao seal with enough true fire to refine his fire element. By then, the carcass wouldn't be useful to him anymore regardless of how precious it was. It had never crossed Yang Kai's mind that a move he was forced to make would lead to a chance for him to achieve his goal. Without hesitation, he hurriedly sealed off the 6 Fated Paths bag. This move was futile as the high-rank cultivators could easily break the seal if they wanted to open the bag. However, it would be enough for Yang Kai to disguise his activities. He absolutely couldn't let them find out that he was secretly absorbing the Golden Crow's true fire. Next, he sat down with his legs crossed in front of the carcass and placed his hand on the beast's forehead. Upon activating the power of his Dao seal, Yang Kai began drawing the true fire into his body. As time passed, the scuffle outside the bag continued. No one could have expected that an Emperor Realm Jr. would have the guts to make such a move while several high-rank Open Heaven Masters were fighting for the bag he was hiding in. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. The fire element in Yang Kai's Dao seal was slowly filled up as he was finally able to set his mind at ease. Gradually, he forgot the situation he was in as he focused everything on condensing his fire element. There came a moment when the Dao seal was completely filled with fire element and could no longer absorb the Golden Crow's true fire. It was only then that Yang Kai came to his senses, knowing that he had successfully condensed his fire element. Next, he probed the carcass and realized that there was still some true fire left. However, it was already much weaker than it was in the past. He wasn't even sure if it was enough for another person to condense their fire element. However, that had nothing to do with him anymore as he was content with the rewards he had reaped for his adventure. Even if someone took the carcass from him without giving him any benefits now, Yang Kai wouldn't mind. The only question for him was how he could escape from this crisis. It wasn't like he could stay inside the bag forever, as he had to face the consequences of his actions sooner or later. Moreover, he wasn't sure whose hands the bag would ultimately fall into. He secretly hoped that C2 Kong would obtain the bag. But what if someone else successfully snatched it? Yang Kai had the intention of finding out what had been going on outside the bag, but he still remembered the horrifying feeling of his divine sense being ripped apart previously. After hesitating for a long time, he made up his mind and gritted his teeth. Then, he opened up the barrier and secretly released his divine sense. He was prepared to get his divine sense torn apart again, but after a glance, he realized that the situation outside the bag was different from what he had imagined. The battle between the high-rank masters had clearly ended as it was all serene in the void. He could sense that only a small number of people were left in this place and there was now a chessboard set up in the void. C2 Kong was seated on one side of the chessboard while the young man Yang Kai suspected of being from Myriad Demon's Heaven was seated across from him. To the side, there were also some people with profound auras. The proprietress, Bai Qi, the accountant, and the shop hands from Firstin were standing behind C2 Kong. What's going on? Yang Kai was baffled. While he was lost in his thoughts, C2 Kong suddenly said, "Come out now. Do you think you can hide inside that bag forever?" As he spoke, he shot an impassive look towards Yang Kai. Although they were separated by the bag's seal, Yang Kai could still feel that the elderly man was able to look deep into his soul. Obviously, C2 Kong was speaking to Yang Kai. After hesitating for a bit, Yang Kai knew that he had to face the music no matter what. Since he had successfully condensed his fire element already, there was nothing else he needed. At the thought of this, he leaped out of the 6 Fated Paths bag. At that instant, some people turned to look at him with examining gazes, which caused him to feel his chest tightening. On the other hand, the young man, who was seated across from C2 Kong, flashed a wicked smile at him. An alarmed Yang Kai thought that if the young man made a move against him, even a casual one on a whim, he wouldn't be able to resist. Fortunately, the probing stares and the young man's smile only lasted for a short moment as everyone soon stopped paying attention to him. Seeing that, Yang Kai was slightly relieved as he hid behind C2 Kong and let out a breath. Just then, he felt someone staring resentfully at him. He turned his head only to be met with Madame Lan's exquisite-looking eyes. With a forced smile, he cupped his fists and said in a small voice, "Proprietress." The resentful proprietress said through clenched teeth, "Smelly brat. This is all your fault." Yang Kai flashed an embarrassed smile at her and stepped back to stand beside Bai Qi. Although he had no idea why the proprietress was so incensed, he reckoned that he'd better stay further away from her. As for Bai Qi, he secretly gave him a thumbs up with an admiring look on his face, which rendered Yang Kai speechless. It wasn't until this moment that Yang Kai realized that the 6 Fated Paths bag was firmly held in Si Tukong's hand. Apparently, the owner of First In had won the contest, which was why the bag was in his possession now. What's going on? Yang Kai couldn't understand what was happening now. He also wondered why Si Tukong was playing chess with the young man after snatching the bag. With no one else to ask, he could only turn to Bai Qi. Bai Qi looked around before secretly sending him a divine sense message. They're trying to determine who the winner will be through a game of chess. This is the last round. If owner can defeat him, he'll be able to take the golden crow carcass home. Upon hearing that, Yang Kai was dumbstruck. They're battling against one another through a game of chess? Were they not locked in an intense battle earlier? How did the chessboard become the battlefield in the end? The transition was too awkward for him to understand. Moreover, Si Tukong had snatched the bag so he could just run away. Why did he decide to play a game of chess with them? However, after giving it a thought, Yang Kai realized that if Si Tukong could flee, he would have done so already. His opponents at the scene were all high-rank open heaven cultivators as well, so although Si Tukong had gained the upper hand by obtaining the bag, he wouldn't be able to go against them if they joined forces to stop him. Looking at it from another perspective, regardless of which high-rank cultivator obtained the bag, the others wouldn't give up without being convinced first. This was basically a deadlock, as the others would join forces to deal with the one who got his hands on the bag. That was the reason they decided to play a game of chess to determine the winner. It was a win-win situation, as they could sit down and sort out the problem peacefully. However, judging from what Bai Qi had said, Yang Kai reckoned that Si Tukong was the more skillful one amongst this group when it came to chess. Although Yang Kai could understand the game and give it a try, he wasn't really familiar with it. Therefore, he wasn't certain whether Si Tukong or the young man had gained the upper hand by just looking at the chessboard as it was currently. Nevertheless, by observing their expressions, he concluded that Si Tukong was the more confident one. On the other hand, the young man kept frowning from time to time as he seemed to be in a dilemma. The speed at which he made a move was also much slower than the old man. At this rate, it seemed it was just a matter of time before Si Tukong could defeat his final opponent. Yang Kai wasn't really interested in the game, as he was most concerned about his 6 Fated Paths bag. Now that the golden crow carcass was in Si Tukong's grasp, he shouldn't even think about getting it back. Moreover, he had fully condensed his fire element, so it was pointless for him to offend everyone further. Nevertheless, Yang Kai wanted his bag back, and wondered if Si Tukong would return it to him. If the bag was taken away from him, he would suffer an immense loss. He was so dejected that his face started contorting. Just then, he was shocked by a crashing sound. Raising his head, he realized that the chessboard that was placed between Si Tukong and the young man had been flipped upside down, and the chess pieces were scattered everywhere. The young man stood up straight with a frustrated expression. It's pointless to continue. This went to show how terrible his demeanor was as he flipped the board after seeing he couldn't win. Si Tukong rose from his seat and replied with a smile, "My respects." The young man shot him a cold glare. "Don't be too proud of yourself. You've simply lived for a longer time. This king wouldn't have lost the game if it was something else." Si Tukong replied casually, "With age comes wisdom, or didn't you know?" The young man scoffed. "Old people also tend to pass away first. I hope that you'll still be so energetic the next time we meet. Farewell." Upon finishing his words, he turned into a dark cloud and shot into the distance. He left without any hesitation. Upon seeing this, the other high-rank cultivators also took their leave. No one congratulated Si Tukong, as they were not in the mood to do so. The reason they had stayed until now was that they wanted to witness the outcome. Now that the winner had emerged, it was pointless for them to stay there. In the blink of an eye, everyone was gone except for those from First In. Yang Kai felt slightly awkward because he was the only outsider. The proprietress said smilingly, "Congratulations, sir." The others also congratulated him. Si Tukong waved his hand. "There's nothing worth congratulating, as it's just a material. Although there have been some upheavals, we've finally obtained it." Then, he gazed at Yang Kai with a smile. Take it out. Following that, he tossed the bag at him. A surprised Xianxia caught the bag and hurriedly shook out the golden crow carcass. Then, he quickly stored the bag as though he was worried that it would be taken away from him. C2 Kong didn't mind his attitude as he was more concerned about the carcass, as was everyone else. With the exception of Madame Lan, none of them had seen an adult golden crow at such a close distance before. Xianxia appeared calm on the surface, but inside was feeling nervous. He had absorbed a lot of the true fire from the golden crow to condense his fire element. The true fire within the carcass was already much weaker than it was before, so he wondered if C2 Kong would notice. Fortunately, C2 Kong only examined it briefly before waving his hand, upon which the carcass disappeared from the spot. It wasn't certain where he had put it. With that said, Xianxia was sure that the carcass wasn't put inside a space ring. Even his small sealed world was unable to store the golden crow carcass, so there was no way an ordinary space ring could do so. After putting away the carcass, C2 Kong turned to look at Madame Lan. I'll leave the rest to you. Madame Lan elegantly saluted him. Please rest assured, sir. C2 Kong nodded and performed a hand seal, after which an abstruse pattern appeared beneath his feet and swirled around him. Xianxia could clearly feel the fluctuation of space principles coming from it. While he was amazed and wondered if C2 Kong was also a master of the Tao of space, the latter disappeared from the spot in a flash of light. A dazed Xianxia soon realized that it wasn't that C2 Kong was adept at space principles, but rather that he had used the universe transference law, which Bai Qi had explained to him before. C2 Kong must have gone to one of the nearby universe temples. So, this is how the universe transference law works. Xianxia fell into his thoughts. Now that he had seen it, he realized there was actually a problem with the universe transference law. As a high-rank open heaven realm master, C2 Kong still needed a couple of breaths to use the universe transference law, so it would undoubtedly take longer for weaker cultivators. This amount of time was not to be underestimated. During a life or death moment, a single blink could be the difference between living or dying. In order to use the universe transference law to flee from danger, it seemed one had to make sure that no one would disturb them. While he was lost in his thoughts, Xianxia suddenly felt a piercing stare which caused him to shudder. Upon raising his head, he forced a smile. Proprietress. Madame Lan kept a smile on her face and said in a soft voice, Your name is Xianxia, right? A terrified Xianxia nodded. Yes. The proprietress nodded slightly, and just when Xianxia thought she was going to say something, she hung her head low as though she had fallen into her thoughts. Xianxia felt like he was on pins and needles as he cupped his fists. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave now. Terrible things might happen if he stayed there. So without waiting for her reply, he turned around and tried to leave. Don't you want your things anymore? The proprietress' voice could be heard coming from behind. A shocked Xianxia turned his head. What do you mean? The proprietress replied. What's wrong? Did you think our first-in would buy and sell by compulsion? Although Xianxia was both surprised and shocked, he still asked tentatively, what do you mean by that? She then explained, although you've been uncooperative and owner had to expend a great deal of effort to get the carcass. First in has always been fair when it comes to doing business. So we wouldn't take your things for free. Otherwise, others will think that we've oppressed you by stealing. Xianxia couldn't believe his ears. Upon turning around, he rubbed his hands together with an elated expression. So, do you mean that your offers are still valid? 10 million open heaven pills and the assurance to help him ascend to the fifth order open heaven realm could be said to be very attractive offers. In your dreams, the proprietress snorted. If you had agreed to it earlier, the offers wouldn't have changed. But now the situation is different and our agreement must be altered as such. I'm sure you can understand. Xianxia was startled for a moment, but he never intended to haggle over this point, so, after a nod, he replied, Of course, I can understand that. What will I get as compensation now? The compensation came as a surprise, so he wasn't going to pretend that he didn't want it. The proprietress fished out a space ring and waved it in front of Xianxia. There are 10 million open heaven pills inside. Upon finishing her words, she tossed the ring to him. After taking the ring, Xianxia scanned it with his divine sense and became dumbstruck. The open heaven pills inside the ring were piled up like a mountain. and the glow radiating from the pills dazzled his eyes. It was impossible for him to count them all at once, but from the look of it, there really should be 10 million pills. At that instant, he still couldn't believe that he had obtained 10 million pills so easily. It was substantial wealth for anyone who had just arrived in the outer universe, and with the right connections one could even buy a sixth-order material with this amount. Old Fong and the others could never have expected that Yang Kai would possess a ring that contained 10 million pills one day. Although he was over the moon, he still remained calm, thinking that those from First In had really treated him well. After all that had happened, they still gave him such generous compensation, which made him feel somewhat guilty. After all, he had absorbed a lot of the Golden Crow's true fire, so he wasn't sure if the remaining true fire was enough for another person to condense their fire element. If it wasn't enough, it would ruin that person's cultivation for life. Nevertheless, he couldn't expose this secret, so he had no choice but to keep his mouth shut. While Yang Kai was still lost in his thoughts though, the proprietress said coldly, "Now that you've gotten your compensation, it's time we talked about this queen's losses." A shocked Yang Kai lifted his head. "Your losses? What do you mean?" He instinctively had a bad premonition, and even the ring in his hands seemed to have become scorching hot. The proprietress sneered, "As I said, First In values our reputation deeply, so we have always been fair when it comes to doing business. Since you've given us some benefits, we naturally have to provide you with appropriate compensation in return. However, since you've also made us suffer some losses, we'll need appropriate compensation from you. See? Perfectly fair, isn't it?" Then, she clenched her fist and declared, "Let us settle accounts now." The accountant stepped forward from the crowd and made some loud noises with the golden abacus in his hands. Yang Kai became dumbfounded as he stared at the accountant. A moment later, the accountant was done with his calculation and presented the abacus to the proprietress. With a sympathetic look on his face, he gazed at Yang Kai and announced, "Including the accommodation fee, you owe us 20,046,000 pills in total." The proprietress nodded gently and fiddled with the abacus with her slender fingers. Then she said impassively, "We'll just round it down and make it an even 20 million. "Yes," the accountant replied. The proprietress extended her hand, and before Yang Kai could react, the ring that contained 10 million pills was taken back by her. With the ring in her hand, she showed it to Yang Kai and demanded, "There are 10 million pills here, so you now owe us just 10 million. Yang Kai was astounded. Just a few moments ago, he became wealthy as he was dazzled by 10 million pills, but in the next instant, he owed the proprietress 10 million pills for no apparent reason. Then, he became incensed as he gritted his teeth and glared at her. "Is it fun to mess with me?" The proprietress gave him a look with her alluring eyes and replied dispassionately, "Do you think I'm messing with you? I don't have the time to waste on such things." "What do you mean by this, then?" Yang Kai felt his fury rising within him like a volcano that would erupt at any moment. He secretly swore that if she couldn't give him a satisfactory explanation, he would immediately summon his azure dragon spear and stab it at her beautiful face. Regardless of whether he could defeat her or not, he would make a move first and deal with the consequences later. He still had a Miemeng's golden tail feather that could be put to use anyway. "What do I mean?" The proprietress was so exasperated that she started laughing. Then she pointed in a particular direction. "See for yourself." Yang Kai turned his head around, but there was nothing special in sight. A moment later, he gazed at the proprietress and asked, "What? What was he supposed to look at when there was nothing over there?" The proprietress said slowly through clenched teeth, "First In was destroyed. What does that?" Before Yang Kai finished his words, he gulped down what he was about to say. With a frown, he soon realized what had happened. Then he appeared helpless. "I didn't destroy your inn, so what's the point of settling accounts with me?" The proprietress snapped. "If it weren't because of you, the inn wouldn't have been destroyed. I've been in charge of the inn for 1,300 years without making a single mistake. However, because of you, my inn is now gone. Who else should I settle the score with?" Yang Kai replied under his breath, "Look for those who actually broke down your inn. Don't worry, this queen will never let those bastards off. But as you're the main culprit, you have to take up most of the responsibility. I don't think I've gone overboard by demanding 20 million pills from you." "You!" Yang Kai was infuriated. "Don't go too far." Just then, A figure flashed across his eyes as he caught a whiff of a pleasant scent. The next instant, a slender finger was pointed at his chest as a dangerous aura fluctuated around the tip of her finger. Madame Lan narrowed her eyes and threatened, "I dare you to say that again." Yang Kai gulped as he looked down at the finger on his chest. Then he minced his words and said, "Proprietress, can we discuss this? While I feel sorry that your inn has been destroyed, I never made a move or damaged a single piece of furniture. So I don't think it's righteous of you to try to extract wealth from me because of that." "You say I'm not righteous?" The proprietress laughed in exasperation. "If you had accepted my offer from the start, none of this would have happened. How dare you say that it has nothing to do with you? I have the right to decide whether I wanted to accept your offers or not. As a business person, you couldn't force me to agree to anything. Could you?" The proprietress said, "No one was forcing you, and you indeed had a right to decide whether you wanted to accept my offers. But do you have the guts to say that the inn's destruction has nothing to do with you?" Yang Kai braced himself and replied, "No, I don't think it has anything to do with me." The proprietress examined him for a moment and started laughing. Upon withdrawing her hand, she swung her sleeve. "It's fine even if you don't admit it. No one can renege on a debt with me." Yang Kai balled up his fists and glared at her. With a faint smile on her face, the proprietress stared back at him with a mocking gaze. Behind her, Bai Qi kept hinting at him with his gaze to motion for him to calm down. After taking a deep breath, Yang Kai suppressed his urge to summon the golden tail feather to make a scene, then he looked away. "I have no money." 10 million open heaven pills were an astronomical number for him. There was no way he could fork out so many pills. Surprisingly, though, Madame Lan simply said, "I don't expect you to pay me now." Yang Kai turned his head in shock. Then, "Do you need a note of indebtedness or something? It would be wonderful if he could flee from this place by leaving such a note." The outer universe was expansive, so he might not come across the proprietress again if he was careful enough. Certainly, it wasn't hard for the proprietress to order her subordinates to look for him, but if he never showed up again, it would be easy for him to escape from her. "What would I do with a mere notice of debt?" The proprietress sneered and sized him up. Then, she said impassively, "However, you can use your body to compensate." Yang Kai almost spat blood as he thought he had heard her wrong. "What?" Ignoring him, the proprietress ordered her subordinates, "Take him. We're leaving." Upon receiving the order, Bai Qi and the accountant stepped forward and captured Yang Kai. An astounded Yang Kai bellowed, "What are you doing?" While the accountant sported a poker face, Bai Qi kept winking at him. But it was hard to know what message he was trying to convey. Madame Lan raised her hand and summoned an artifact that looked like a ship. The artifact expanded rapidly and turned into a several dozen meters long ship with 3 floors. Then, she flew towards a room on the top floor and stepped inside. Those from first in subsequently boarded the ship and got to work. Yang Kai was dragged towards the ship by Bai Qi and the accountant. Although the ship looked ordinary from the outside, Yang Kai could feel that it was of a much better quality than the ship from Great Moon Province, which wasn't surprising seeing as it was the proprietress artifact, so it must be good enough to match her status. After a hum, the ship trembled slightly as a visible membrane appeared and surrounded it. The next instant, Yang Kai shuddered as he could feel the ship moving rapidly in a particular direction. A baffled Yang Kai turned to look at Bai Qi. "Where are we going?" Bai Qi shook his head. "I have no idea. Proprietress never told us." "You have no idea as well?" Then, Yang Kai shifted his attention to the accountant, who silently released him and shuffled into the cabin. Bai Qi stretched his back, and upon seeing that Yang Kai appeared dejected, he patted his shoulder. "Are you still upset? If you were me, would you not be upset?" After giving it a thought, Bai Qi nodded his head. "I would have felt the same way, however, not everything is as simple as it seems. We should think positively." A frustrated Yang Kai replied, "I don't know what benefits I'll gain out of it." "Then look over there." Bai Qi suddenly extended his finger. Yang Kai looked in the direction he pointed and faintly saw a ship silently hovering in the distant void. "What do you mean?" he asked in puzzlement. Bai Qi grinned. "I have no idea which great force they're from. However, if you left on your own just now, they certainly wouldn't have let you go. I'm sure you can imagine what the outcome of that would be. Yang Kai frowned. But the carcass was taken away by Senior C Tuesday. It's pointless for them to care about me. True. But who knows whether you obtained other treasures from the Golden Crow Divine Palace. For example, things like Sun's True Fires or Sun's True Golds. Yang Kai was startled for a moment before he said through gritted teeth, outrageous. Although he had no Sun's True Gold, he had obtained quite a number of Sun's True Fires, 3 of which were 5th order. Bai Qi patted his shoulder. Proprietress might seem ruthless from your perspective, but she's actually protecting you. Regardless of whether you're willing or not, we have a business deal with you. So there's no way we'll see you falling into danger and stand idly by. If we really did that, our reputation would be tarnished. In that case, should I go over and thank her? Yang Kai snorted. That's up to you, Bai Qi shrugged. A furious Yang Kai said, even if she's well-meaning, what is she trying to achieve by making me owe her 10 million pills? She could have directly told me that she wanted to protect me. Well, Bai Qi scratched his chin. I'm not sure about that, so you have to talk to the proprietress. With that said, you're indeed responsible for the inn's destruction. Presently, Yang Kai was hesitating in front of a room on the top floor of the ship. A long time later, he summoned enough courage and knocked on the door. A languid voice could be heard coming from the room. Come in. Yang Kai forced himself to push the door open. Upon entering the room, he realized that the interior wasn't luxurious. Instead, it gave off a clean and fresh feeling. The scent that permeated was pleasant, but he wasn't sure if it was the smell of sandalwood or bodily fragrance. The proprietress was nowhere in sight, so he figured she was in the inner room. Upon pulling the bead curtains apart, Yang Kai saw the proprietress lying on her side on a wooden bed. With one hand propping up her temple, she appeared languid as her clothes perfectly outlined her curvy figure. Without looking at her, Yang Kai said impassively, "What do you want?" Then he fell silent and sized her up. They had frequently come into contact, but they mostly argued or fought one another, so he had never had a proper look at this woman before. Upon closer examination, he realized that the proprietress was indeed strikingly gorgeous, as every move she made had an innate charm to it. Even just lying there, she still appeared indescribably alluring. It was no wonder that the customers at the inn would always try to flirt with her. No man in the world would ignore such an enchantress. On the wooden bed, the proprietress suddenly opened her eyes. "If you dare to keep staring, I'll dig your eyes out." Yang Kai lowered his gaze and shuffled forward, while the proprietress was dumbfounded. He climbed onto the bed and moved past her before lying on the other side. Then, he spread his limbs and looked away as though he felt utterly humiliated. "Even if you can obtain my body, you'll never have my heart." The proprietress was astounded, as what Yang Kai had done was simply too shocking. Even a 6th order open heaven realm master like her was unable to react to it when he climbed into the bed all of a sudden. As though she had been stung by a scorpion, she jumped up and stood on the bed before glaring at him, so exasperated her entire body shook as she snarled, "What are you doing?" Yang Kai turned to look at her. "You said." Over 10 breaths later, a pitiful shriek was heard. Following that, the door flung open, and Yang Kai shot out of the room like an arrow leaving the bow, crashing into the light barrier around the ship before he slid down miserably. Covering his chest with his hands, he bellowed, "It's you who didn't make yourself clear. You said I could compensate with my body, but now you attack me? Why are you so unreasonable? Get lost." The proprietress yelled from the room. "What's going on?" Bai Qi and the others dashed out of the cabin after hearing the commotion. Then they saw Yang Kai standing there with a furious expression. 2 symmetrical dark circles around his eyes. At that instant, they felt like they had seen a similar sight before. "What are you all looking at? Get back to work. Now!" The proprietress growled, upon which Bai Qi and the others shrank their necks and hurriedly left. "Crazy woman!" Yang Kai cursed through clenched teeth before shuffling towards the cabin. "What did you just say? I dare you to repeat that." The proprietress was heard yelling. Yang Kai glared at the room on the 3rd floor as his lips trembled for some time before he hung his head low. A wise man does not fight against the odds. Then he dashed into the cabin and looked for an empty room. Upon entering a room, he realized that it was spacious and had complete facilities. Then he sat down on the bed with his legs crossed and rubbed his black eyes as he felt completely incensed. When the proprietress said that his body could serve as a form of compensation, he thought she wanted to bed him, but he hadn't expected that it wasn't what she meant at all. She simply wanted him to work for first in, slowly earning back his freedom from his 10 million open heaven pill debt. Although he had no idea how much money Bai Qi and the others received every month as salary, he reckoned that it wouldn't be so easy to pay back 10 million pills. Therefore, he would probably be forced to work for that crazy woman for tens or even hundreds of years. At the thought of this, Xianxia let out a long sigh. There were some benefits he could gain by following the proprietress. At the very least, a sixth-order open realm master like her was powerful enough to ensure his safety. However, it was also dangerous to work for her. He had absorbed most of the Golden Crow's true fire to condense his fire element. If she found out about it in the future, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. Recalling the Golden Crow's true fire, Xianxia became fervent. He had condensed his fire element in the 6 Fated Paths bag, but he hadn't had an opportunity to examine himself. Now that he was free, he wanted to see what transformation he had gone through. Thus, he emptied his mind and inspected himself. Inside his Dao seal, 2 wisps of light, one green and one black, could be seen swirling around. The green one was full of vitality while the black one was quite low-key. Despite that, it contained an aura that seemed capable of burning down the world. The wood element and fire element lived in harmony within his Dao seal, which was why the 2 colors existed at the same time. Although it looked slightly odd, it gave off a powerful feeling. The Golden Crow's true fire was immensely powerful, but Xianxia had successfully absorbed it and condensed his fire element from it. He came to the realization that the proprietress was right to say that only a wood element that was strong enough could suppress the true fire. If his wood element wasn't strong enough, his Dao seal would have been at risk of shattering after he absorbed the true fire. Once his Dao seal collapsed, the foundation of his martial Dao would be destroyed and he would certainly lose his life. Besides that, Xianxia could also feel that his strength had increased. It then dawned on him that just like the open heaven realm masters, there was a gap in power between those who had condensed their Dao seals. The reason for that disparity was how many of the yin, yang, and 5 elements one had condensed. Every time a cultivator successfully condensed an element, their cultivation would increase significantly. Once a person managed to condense 5 elements, there would be an exponential growth in their strength. Such a person was called a half-step open heaven realm master. Only after splitting heaven and earth apart within their body would one be able to take another great leap forward in power. Certainly, the growth rate was also correlated to the order of the materials one absorbed. If a cultivator had condensed a single 3rd-order material while another had condensed a 7th-order material, the latter would certainly be more powerful. Xianxia felt that his strength had increased considerably, but he hadn't battled against anyone yet, so he couldn't make a proper judgment. Whatever the case, it was good news for him. The incident at the Golden Crow Divine Palace made him desperately crave greater strength. He wouldn't want to be helplessly hunted down by a group of open heaven realm masters again. Next, Xianxia decided that he wouldn't easily use the Golden Crow's true fire unless he was left with no other choice, otherwise his secret would be exposed. Now, he had successfully condensed his fire element, and he was satisfied with the order of the material. Although he wasn't sure what order the true fire was, Xianxia reckoned that it was at least 7th order. Wood supported fire, which then suppressed earth. His next step was to condense the power of earth. Xianxia was immensely lucky to have obtained the Golden Crow's true fire, but where was he going to look for a 7th order or higher earth attribute material? He was clueless. A 7th order material could possibly be bought for 150 million open heaven pills, but Xianxia severely doubted whether one could actually purchase such a material with just pills. Just like the sun's true gold, once such a treasure appeared, countless top cultivators would come over and fight for it. Even if a great force possessed such a material, it would likely serve as a strategic resource and not be sold for any price. Xianxia couldn't think of any item in his possession that could be traded for such a treasure with those great forces. Furthermore, without being powerful enough, he had no right to make such a deal in the first place. Therefore, it was pointless to think about it for the time being. In any case, his fire element had just been condensed, so he needed some time to stabilize it and adapt to his new strength. The ship moved forward at great speed, but it wasn't clear where it was heading. While Xianxia was meditating, he suddenly heard someone knocking on the door. With a frown, he got to his feet and opened it only to see Bai Qi holding a tray with delicate dishes and a jar of wine on it. Upon catching a whiff of the aroma, Yang Kai forced a smile and stepped aside. "Come in." Bai Qi was startled for a moment before he said, "It's not for you." A speechless Yang Kai asked, "Why are you here if these dishes aren't for me?" Bai Qi pointed at the ceiling. "The proprietress wants it." A puzzled Yang Kai asked, "Since she wants it, you should go to her instead of coming to my place." With a sympathetic look on his face, Bai Qi explained, "She has given the order that you must deliver it to her." Then, he pushed the tray towards Yang Kai and didn't wait for his reply. "It's your job now. Do it well." Yang Kai was rooted to the spot as Bai Qi left, and only after coming to his senses did he bellow, "Outrageous!" Following that, he raised the tray in an attempt to smash it to the ground, but he didn't have the guts to do so in the end. As his face twitched visibly, he thought that the crazy woman had started bossing him around as though he was really a shop hand in her inn. After taking a deep breath, he suppressed his fury and stared at the dishes on the tray. Although he had the urge to spit on them, he was worried that the proprietress might be monitoring him. Hence, he didn't do it in the end. "What are you waiting for? Come up now." The proprietress' voice suddenly rang out. Yang Kai shuddered as he realized she was indeed monitoring him. Fortunately, he didn't spit on the dishes on a whim, otherwise he would be punished. "I'm coming now." "Stop rushing me." Yang Kai replied in exasperation before leaving the room with the tray in his hands. Upon reaching the top floor, he kicked the door open, but before he could enter, he was swept backwards by a gale. "Didn't your parents tell you that you have to knock before entering another's room?" The door was then shut with a loud slam, which almost smacked him in the nose. After blowing his top for a while, Yang Kai knocked on the door and asked through clenched teeth, "Is anyone inside?" "Come in." The proprietress was heard replying from the room. Then, Yang Kai pushed the door open and entered the room before putting the tray on the table. "Your food is here. Enjoy." "Where do you think you're going?" the proprietress questioned. Yang Kai turned his head. "Of course, I'm going back to my room to have a rest. What else do you need?" The proprietress retained her languid posture as she pouted her moist lips at the table. "Fill the cup." While the proprietress was watching Yang Kai, the corners of his eyes twitched as he picked up the wine jug and filled the cup for her. The proprietress, who was lying on the wooden bed, then extended her slender hand. Yang Kai was startled for a moment before he laughed in exasperation. "Why are you so lazy?" She was obviously trying to make things difficult for him. However, since he was unable to defeat her, he had no choice but to present the cup to her. A straightforward proprietress gulped down the wine and rubbed the cup with her fingers. Then she shot him a glance. "Are you unhappy with it?" Yang Kai looked up at the ceiling. "I wouldn't dare to. Since I'm in your hands now, you can even kill me as you please." The proprietress put on a smile. "Just say it out loud that you're not happy. There's nothing to be bashful about." Knowing that she loved to mock, Yang Kai decided to ignore her lest she became even smugger. A languid proprietress went on to say, "First Inn is famous throughout the entire outer universe, and many people are unable to join our inn even if they want to. Many people are jealous of you because you've managed to join us. Smelly brat, you should count your blessings." Yang Kai turned to look at her and put on a hollow laugh. Staring at him, the proprietress said, "You're my subordinate now. Are you sure you want to treat me with such an attitude?" An exasperated Yang Kai replied, "What kind of attitude do you expect from me then?" She replied, "I don't need you to be obsequious to me, but you have to respect me at the very least. If others see you treating me in such a way, how am I supposed to discipline them? This is just the way I was born." The proprietress snorted, obviously displeased with his attitude. However, she didn't reprimand him as she fell silent for a moment. "Where's your home?" "I can't tell you." "How many family members do you have?" "I can't tell you." After getting the same reply over and over again, the proprietress lost her patience as she waved her hand. "Go back now." Yang Kai cupped his fists and turned around to leave. The proprietress could be heard saying from behind, "From now on, you'll be responsible for sending me 3 meals a day and cleaning my room." Yang Kai turned around to stare at her, only to see that she had hung her head low and fallen into a dazed state as she held the cup in her hand, as though she was pondering on something. He wasn't sure if it was just an illusion, but the proprietress in such a state made him feel that she was a frail woman, unlike the imposing sixth-order open heaven realm master that she usually was. Gritting his teeth, he replied in a hushed voice, "Understood." Then he returned to his room, and before he even sat down, Bai Qi pushed the door open, entered the room and closed the door, his stealthy behavior that of a thief as he whispered, "Did proprietress make things difficult for you?" Hearing that, Yang Kai landed a palm on the table and bellowed, "She goes too far." A shocked Bai Qi hurriedly took the other man's arm. "What are you doing? Keep it down." He was puzzled as to why Yang Kai was incensed. "Why are you mad? What happened?" Yang Kai replied, "You have no idea how unreasonable she was. She wants me to send her 3 meals a day and keep her room clean. As a sixth-order open heaven realm master, she won't lose her life even if she's starved for 1,000 years. But now, she wants 3 meals a day? What a joke. I've never served a woman before in my life. She's clearly retaliating against me by making things difficult for me." Bai Qi persuaded him by saying that's not true. "The proprietress has nothing against you, so I don't think she'd intentionally make things difficult for you. She might appear to be sharp-tongued, but she's actually a soft-hearted person. You'll get to know her better after spending some time with her." Yang Kai sneered, "I'm afraid that she'll torture me to death first." Bai Qi smiled helplessly. "There's no way that's going to happen. Forget it. I don't want to talk about it anymore." Yang Kai raised his hand to stop him as he clenched his teeth. "Since she wants to mess with me, I'll gladly accept the challenge. Let's see who will be the last one standing." Life was peaceful for everyone in the following days. Although the outer universe was paved with danger, no one in the 3,000 worlds had the guts to attack a first-in-ship as its markings were fairly distinct. Yang Kai was busy every day as he had to send 3 meals a day to the proprietress on time, and he would also have to retrieve the dishes and tableware after a while. He wasn't even sure if the proprietress had eaten anything as the dishes looked the same as when he sent them into her room. Although he was frustrated, he still carried out his task in silence and didn't speak to the proprietress. A few days passed just like that when one day, Yang Kai was meditating in his room when Bai Qi entered without permission again and stuffed an exquisite bamboo basket into his hands. "What's this?" Yang Kai asked. Bai Qi explained, "In 1 hour, we'll pass by a universe world called 9 Nether Continent. There's a place called Heavenly Mountain there. Go over and look for their sect master. After passing the basket to him, your job will be done." "Am I going there alone?" Yang Kai was stunned. Bai Qi nodded. "And you'll be going there on your own. Come back quickly after you're done with the task. Don't mess this up." Without waiting for Yang Kai to speak, he shuffled out of the room upon finishing his words. Yang Kai was puzzled as he held the basket in his hand. With a frown, he pondered on the issue for some time, but he still couldn't understand what was going on. Then he examined the basket and didn't find anything special about it. Although the basket was delicately weaved, there was no powerful barrier around it or any kind of imposing aura radiating from it. Hence, it was clearly not an artifact. Instead, it looked just like the average basket that a mortal could use to carry stuff. 9 Nether Continent, Heavenly Mountain. Yang Kai memorized the names. After 1 hour, the ship, which had been flying non-stop for days, abruptly came to a halt. Yang Kai stepped out of his room and looked around from the deck, whereupon a magnificent universe world from a distance came into sight. Despite the long distance, he could still feel the universe's aura wafting around him. "I suppose that's 9 Nether Continent." Upon that realization, Yang Kai clenched the basket and flew off. The distance between the ship and the continent was just right, 1/2 an hour exactly. Yang Kai arrived at the universe world, and after breaking through the world barrier, he descended upon the continent. It wasn't the first time Yang Kai visited a different universe world. When those from 7 Wonders Land hunted Fong Tai down, he had the opportunity to experience the customs of a different universe world. The world before Yang Kai's eyes seemed to be more powerful than the one he had previously visited, on par with the star boundary at its peak. At the very least, after he broke through the world barrier and arrived at this world, he immediately felt some strong divine senses scanning him. He was Void Great Emperor in the Star Boundary, so Xianxia was quite familiar with such auras, knowing that it was the reaction from the great emperors of this world who had detected a top cultivator's aura. That was the reason he felt his chest tightening. Although he was already much stronger than when he had just ascended to become a great emperor, he was currently in someone else's territory. While those great emperors had the support of this universe world, he had lost the Star Boundary's protection, so the power he could use was limited. If he really got into a scuffle with those great emperors here, he would suffer a setback even if he was a low-rank Open Heaven Realm Master. While Xianxia was pondering on how he should reveal his identity and purpose of visit, those powerful divine senses vanished into thin air. One of the divine senses even showed him some kindness before disappearing, which caused Xianxia to be puzzled. While he was wondering what was going on, he saw a figure rapidly approaching from a distance. Following that, an old and gentle voice was heard saying, "Heavenly Mountain Sect Master, Bao Zetong, greets Special Envoy. Forgive me for not attending to you earlier." The elderly man was still in the distance when he uttered his first word, but by the time he finished, he was already standing in front of Xianxia. Xianxia lifted his head, only to see a burly old man with a ruddy complexion smiling at him. The old man didn't look like anything special, but Xianxia could sense a familiar aura coming from him. Apparently, the old man was a great emperor of this world, and judging from his aura, he figured this old man was the one who showed him kindness earlier. Xianxia hadn't expected that the sect master of Heavenly Mountain would be a great emperor, but that made things easier for him. He was just thinking about whether he should ask around to find out where Heavenly Mountain was, but now that the sect master had personally come over to meet him, it saved him the trouble. However, why did this old man just call him Special Envoy? Suppressing his doubts, Xianxia cupped his fists. Xianxia greets Sect Master Bao. Sect Master Bao is too polite. Regardless of what universe world they were in, only a small number of people could become great emperors by obtaining the world's recognition and will. Although Bao Zetong appeared ordinary, Xianxia wouldn't dare to show any disrespect when he was in someone else's home. "So it is Envoy Yang." The smile on Bao Zetong's face was amiable. "You've put this old man to shame, having achieved such powerful cultivation at such a young age. Many thanks for your compliment, Sect Master Bao." Xianxia replied politely before moving the conversation along. "To be honest with you, I'm here to look for you, but I don't know the reason behind it. Can you tell me why you called me a special envoy?" With a smile, Bao Zetong pointed at the basket in the young man's hand. "The person holding this basket is the special envoy." Upon that realization, Xianxia looked down at the basket. Things are easier now since you can recognize the basket. It was no wonder that the sect master would come over right after he arrived at this place. That was because Bao Zetong could recognize the basket. Xianxia even thought that Bai Qi had informed this elderly man about their visit beforehand. Bao Zetong said, "Let's go somewhere else for a chat. Come with me." Then he stepped forward and apologized to Xianxia before grabbing the young man's arm. The next instant, Xianxia realized that everything around him seemed to be moving rapidly. Seeing that, he knew that it must be a divine ability exclusive to these great emperors. Any great emperor born on the 9 Nether continent could go anywhere as they pleased. This was different from his space secret technique, but had a similar effect. After just a short moment, the pair appeared before a splendid palace. Many cultivators had been waiting here, and seeing the duo, they cried in unison, "Greetings, Sect Master, Special Envoy." Their voices were loud, and since so many of them had gathered together, it was apparent that they were well prepared. In response, Xianxia cupped his fists at them. A woman in an imperial dress emerged from the crowd and saluted Xianxia before extending her hands. Xianxia turned to gaze at Bao Zetong with an inquisitive look on his face, with the latter replying with a smile, "Your basket." Hearing that, Xianxia immediately passed the basket to the woman and nodded. "Many thanks." He had no idea what the basket was for, as Bai Qi had not explained it to him. However, those from Heavenly Mountain were obviously aware of its purpose. In that case, he didn't need to ask any questions, as he just had to pass the basket to them. After taking the basket, the woman shot into the air and disappeared. Xianxia wondered where she was going, but before he could ask, Bao Zetong extended his hand and said, "Envoy Yang, please come in and have a chat with me." Xianxia nodded. "Excuse me then." After they entered the hall, Bao Zedong took the master's seat while Yang Kai sat down as a guest. Following that, a maidservant presented cups of tea and rare fruits to them. Both the tea and the fruits were aromatic. Besides the tea, Yang Kai had never seen the fruits on the plate before. Apparently, these were the fruits exclusive to this world. After having a taste, he realized that they were delicious. Moreover, these fruits could help refine the strength of cultivators. Nevertheless, these fruits were useless to people like Yang Kai and Bao Zedong. Yang Kai just regarded it as trying out new delicacies. As he drank tea and ate fruits, Yang Kai made small talk with Bao Zedong, and soon the atmosphere became lively. A moment later, Bao Zedong asked, "How has Madame been?" Yang Kai reckoned that the elderly man must be talking about Madame Lan, so he nodded, "She's well." In fact, she seemed to be enjoying herself almost too much. No other sixth-order open heaven realm masters needed 3 meals a day. Bao Zedong replied with a smile, "That's good." Then he heaved a sigh. In fact, life has been hard on her. Yang Kai lifted his head. "What do you mean?" Although he had frequently come into contact with the proprietress, he basically knew nothing about her. He only knew that she was a sixth-order open heaven realm master with a powerful background. Therefore, his interest was piqued when Bao Zedong said that life had been hard on her. He was resentful because the proprietress had been tormenting him, but he was unable to defeat her. It would be wonderful if he could learn some gossip about her to make him happier. However, Bao Zedong waved his hand and said, "Please excuse this Bao's loose lips, Envoy Yang." At that, Yang Kai became frustrated. Since the elderly man wasn't willing to tell him, it was inappropriate for him to keep asking. Thus he asked, "By the way, although I've received orders to come here, I have no idea what I should do. Could you please enlighten me?" Without answering his question, Bao Zedong asked, "How long has Envoy Yang worked for Madame?" "A few days." Yang Kai flashed a bashful smile at him. Strictly speaking, he was forced to work under her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have followed that crazy woman around. Bao Zedong nodded. "I see. In fact, it's nothing important. We have a kind of spirit fruit on Heavenly Mountain called Heavenly Snow Fruit. It has a special taste and only grows here. Madame loves this fruit deeply, so she always has someone collect some from us whenever she passes by 9 nether continent." Heavenly Snow Fruit? Yang Kai arched his brow as the name sounded somewhat poetic. He wondered what kind of spirit fruit could hold the proprietress, a sixth-order open heaven realm master's interest so greatly that she would make a point to collect some every time she passed by this place. He decided to have a proper look at them later. It was then he realized why Bai Qi had passed him a bamboo basket. It was supposed to be used to carry these spirit fruits. Heavenly Snow Fruit. As Bao Zedong spoke, he seemed to be walking down memory lane. Then he became dejected. "Let's not talk about it. Since Envoy Yang works under Madame, you will find out about it soon." The elderly man would never finish his words after he started a topic, frustrating Yang Kai to the point he wanted to pry open Bao Zedong's mouth with his azure dragon spear. Bao Zedong realized this as well apparently, so he took the initiative and led the conversation to topics such as cultivation, which Yang Kai was more than willing to go along with. Yang Kai asked him why, since he had become a great emperor, he had not broken free from the world's bounds and headed to an even wider world. Bao Zedong replied with a smile. "This Bao is too old and lacks the ambition he once had. So what if I can break free from this world's restrictions? What can I do after that?" Yang Kai frowned. "Have you decided to stay on 9 nether continent forever?" An optimistic Bao Zedong said, "This Bao was born and raised here, so I'm willing to protect it for the rest of my days." Yang Kai nodded as the star boundary came to mind. If the star boundary hadn't been devastated by Mo Shang, would he have come to the outer universe? Was he willing to stay in the star boundary for the rest of his life? He didn't have an answer to these questions. Half an hour later, the woman, who had taken the basket earlier, returned to the hall and respectfully put it down on the table beside Yang Kai before saluting him. "Sir Special Envoy, your heavenly snow fruits are ready." "Many thanks." Yang Kai nodded and examined the spirit fruits in the basket. He realized that heavenly snow fruits were dark red and about the size of a baby's fist. All of them looked similar in terms of their size, so it was apparent that they were carefully selected. After all, these fruits were for the proprietress, so those from Heavenly Mountain wouldn't dare to be negligent. The fruits were aromatic, so he wondered what they tasted like. After rising from his chair, Yang Kai cupped his fists, Sect Master Bao, since the fruits are ready, I'll take my leave now. Bao Zedong nodded, safe travels, Envoy Yang. When you see Madame later, please send our regards to her and tell her that we're grateful for the protection she has granted our world over the years. I shall. Yang Kai nodded his head and shuffled out of the hall with the basket while Bao Zedong respectfully saw him off. It was easier for him to leave the Nine Nether Continent as, unlike the time he tried to enter, he didn't have to break through the world barrier. Apparently, Bao Zedong must have communicated with the world principles to allow him to pass. Meanwhile, in a room on the top floor of the first-in ship, Bai Qi was standing in front of the proprietress with his head hung low in an obsequious manner. As usual, the proprietress had closed her eyes to take a rest as she was lying on her side on the wooden bed. A long time later, she asked, has he not returned? Bai Qi shook his head, no. I'm worried that he's fled. The proprietress didn't respond to him. Bai Qi went on to say, he was never willing to join first in, so now that he has a chance, it's expected that he'd flee. I'm worried that he won't come back again. Forget it then, the proprietress replied impassively. If he's really fled, his life or death will have nothing to do with us anymore. A shocked Bai Qi said, Proprietress, since you knew this would be the outcome, why did you allow him to go to Nine Nether Continent on his own? Soon, he realized the reason though and nodded. I understand. You were trying to find out whether he would flee. The proprietress replied dispassionately. It's not so complicated. It just annoyed me to see him around me. Bai Qi was speechless at that, but just when he was about to say something, he saw the proprietress opening her eyes as a glint flashed across her gaze. What happened? He asked. He's back. The proprietress closed her eyes again. Bai Qi didn't understand her at first, but he soon realized what happened as he turned around and left the room. Then he stood on the deck and looked out at Nine Nether Continent. As expected, a moment later, a figure flew over rapidly. The person was none other than Yang Kai. He didn't flee. Bai Qi couldn't believe his eyes as he muttered under his breath. He thought for sure that Yang Kai would seize the chance to escape from them, but Yang Kai had really returned. Could this guy be a fool? If Bai Qi were in his shoes, he would have run away. A while later, Yang Kai landed on the deck as the light around him faded and revealed his figure. He raised his head, only to see Bai Qi staring dazedly at him. Yang Kai looked around and furrowed his brow before asking, Why are you looking at me like that? Bai Qi crossed his arms and stroked his chin. As he sized Yang Kai up, he said in amazement, I suddenly realized that you look like someone I once knew. Why hadn't I noticed it in the past? Who are you talking about? Yang Kai asked. Bai Qi shook his head and fell silent. Then he pointed at the room on the top floor to suggest that the proprietress was waiting for him. After a snort, Yang Kai leaped towards the room and knocked on the door. Proprietress, I'm back. Come in. The proprietress' languid voice was heard saying, upon which he pushed the door open. On the deck, Bai Qi seemed to be lost in his thoughts, but he soon shook his head and walked back towards the cabin as he muttered, Why didn't I realize it before? Odd. Then, he entered the accountant's room and told him about it. The accountant looked emotionlessly at him. Are you blind or something? You drank with him pretty frequently, but you only realized it now. You already knew? Bai Qi was astounded. The accountant replied, I realized it the first time he walked into the inn. Upon that realization, Bai Qi said, It's no wonder proprietress wanted him to stay, so that's the reason. Has she been tormenting him because of that as well? Then he put on a bitter expression, It's all over then. She just managed to put down what had happened in the past, but now she's forced to recall those sorrowful memories. What should we do? The accountant replied, I've been pondering on this issue recently, and I've finally come up with a way to permanently settle this problem. Do you want to know? Go on. Bai Qi nodded. The accountant went on to say in a hushed voice, You'll look for a chance and bring him somewhere quiet, then we'll kill him together. After finishing his words, he slashed at his own neck with his hand. The corner of Bai Qi's eye twitched. Is this what you mean by a permanent solution? The accountant said matter-of-factly. Do you have another solution? No, no, no. Bai Qi shook his head. We don't even know what proprietress really thinks about it. If we cause her even more sorrow, we'll be eternal sinners. The accountant heaved a sigh. That's a problem as well. The most important thing is that we have to find out what proprietress thinks. Why don't you try to sound her out? Bai Qi shook his head like a pellet drum. You know what she's like during this period of time every year. We must not look for her for the next 3 days. Otherwise, it'd be akin to courting death. Hearing that, the accountant couldn't help but shudder as though he had recalled a horrible memory. In a resolute manner, he said, I'll go into seclusion for a few days now. Tell the others not to bother proprietress for the next 3 days. I've already told them about it, or rather, they've all worked for the inn for a long time now, so they don't need me to remind them. In any case, I'll also go into hiding now. In the room on the top floor, Xianxia entered the inner room and put down the basket on the table before saying, Proprietress, I've brought back your fruits. If there's nothing else, I'll take a rest now. He wondered why the proprietress loved these heavenly snow fruits so much as on his way back. He had tried one of them and realized that they were actually quite bitter and sour, making them basically unpalatable. However, Bao Zedong told him that the proprietress would always tell someone to fetch a batch of these fruits every time she passed by 9 nether continent. In the end, Xianxia figured everyone had their own preferences when it came to food and just left it at that. The proprietress remained unfazed on the wooden bed, so after waiting for a moment, Xianxia cupped his fists and turned around to leave. Upon returning to his room, he sat down with his legs crossed and started adjusting his breathing. Now he had condensed the fire element in his Dao seal. Although its order did meet his expectations, he needed more time to stabilize it. This was not a process that could be rushed. Furthermore, he wasn't even sure where to look for an earth element material, so he reckoned that he'd stabilize the element he had just obtained while he was waiting. He could clearly feel that the fire element in his Dao seal contained an aura that could burn down all existence. This kind of power was horrifying when used against enemies, but unfortunately, the features of Golden Crow's true fire were too conspicuous. It was different from his wood element, which mainly worked internally, so others wouldn't notice it. His fire element might be exposed if he was not careful, and if that happened, it would be hard for him to explain himself. Therefore, Xianxia secretly decided that unless he was left with no choice, he wouldn't activate the fire element in his Dao seal. Just like his dragon transformation secret technique, this power had become one of his hidden trump cards. 2 points of light, 1 green, 1 black, continued swirling around in his Dao seal, forming an abstruse picture. While he was meditating, Xianxia suddenly heard a strange voice, which prompted him to open his eyes and carefully listen. The voice was indistinct at first, but after listening to it for a while, he realized that it was a woman who was weeping. However, the cry sounded suppressed. If it weren't because Xianxia's senses had become sensitive due to the fact that he was fully focused, he wouldn't have heard it at all. Why was a woman heard crying in this expansive void all of a sudden? Furthermore, her voice sounded mournful, as though she had experienced some kind of deep, sorrowful tragedy. At that instant, Xianxia had goosebumps all over his body. He wanted to ignore it at first, but the voice just wouldn't stop reaching his ears, which made it impossible for him to focus on his meditation. With a frown, he got to his feet and pushed the door open before looking for the source of the voice. A moment later, he stood on the deck of the ship and looked up at the room on the top floor, thoroughly astounded. The woman's cry was clearly coming from the room on the top floor. In other words, it was the proprietress who was weeping. Xianxia thought that he had sensed it wrongly. As a 6th-order open heaven realm master, the proprietress could be considered one of the top cultivators in the entire 3,000 worlds. So how was it possible that she'd be secretly sobbing? However, the voice was indeed coming from the top floor. Serves you right, Xianxia snorted. He had been tormented by the proprietress for the past few days, and although he had no idea why she was so sorrowful, the sobbing was like music to his ears, causing him to feel gleeful. After listening to it for a while, he folded his hands behind his back and returned to his room in a calm and collected manner. At that moment, he no longer felt so irritated about what had happened these past few days. One day later, Xianxia, who was meditating on his bed, appeared incensed as he looked up at the ceiling with clenched teeth. Is she not done yet? He wondered what this crazy woman had come across that made her cry for the entire day. Although she was just secretly sobbing, she still unintentionally affected the others around her due to her powerful cultivation. Xianxia was unable to keep calm and meditate, which was why he was currently grinding his teeth in annoyance. Exasperated, he leapt off the bed, and a moment later he appeared in front of the proprietress' room and knocked on the door. Proprietress. Proprietress. She didn't respond to him, but her sobbing was still heard coming from the room. I'm entering now, Xianxia said and directly pushed the door open. After entering the inner room, he took a glance at his surroundings as his face twitched. The room, which was originally spotless, had become a mess with fruit pits scattered everywhere. All the tables and chairs had been turned upside down, and a thick smell of alcohol permeated the air. Then he looked to the side, only to see that half of the fruits in the basket were gone. Apparently, the proprietress had eaten them. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been so many fruit pits on the floor. Xianxia wondered how the proprietress managed to eat these fruits since they were so bitter and sour. Following that, he turned to look at the wooden bed and frowned. In the corner of the bed, the proprietress had her arms wrapped around her legs and she had buried her head between her knees. As she was sobbing, her shoulders could be seen shaking. Xianxia had never expected to see such a sight. At this moment, the first-in proprietress looked so frail that it was as though she was a small kitten with no place to call home. Xianxia couldn't help feeling slightly affected by this scene and secretly heaved a sigh. What had happened to her? Why did she end up in such a state? It seemed she was a woman in the end. Despite her incredible strength, she would still be vulnerable at times. At that instant, he no longer took pleasure in her misfortune as he began putting the tables and chairs straight while cleaning up the fruit pits and empty wine bottles. After he was done with that, he stood in front of the wooden bed and gave it a thought. However, he still had no idea how to console her, mainly because he didn't know what had happened to cause all this. Thus, he sighed and clapped the proprietress' shoulder. Proprietress, misfortune is a part of life. Let go of the past and stop crying. The proprietress, who was sobbing, lifted her head and gazed at him. As their eyes met, the corners of his eyes twitched. Presently, the proprietress appeared extremely sorrowful as her alluring eyes were as swollen as a pair of peaches. Her face was covered in tears, and there were still teardrops wetting her long eyelashes. Moreover, her face had turned scarlet. By just looking at her, one could understand what it meant to be heartbroken. Xianxia forced a harmless smile as he looked down at her. The proprietress' vision slowly focused, and her frailty was soon replaced by ferocity as she pressed her lips together and then said through clenched teeth, "Smelly brat, it's you." Ha! Xianxia instinctively had a bad premonition. It seemed that the proprietress was thoroughly intoxicated. But how could a sixth-order open heaven realm master even get drunk? How dare you come back? The proprietress questioned resentfully, her gaze filled with tears and grievance. What? Xianxia was completely baffled. The next instant, he felt a grip on his arm. He lowered his gaze, only to see that the proprietress had clenched his arm as a violent force gushed into his body. At that moment, his expression changed drastically, as he felt like he was a leaf that had dropped onto a raging ocean. He was completely unable to use his energy, and faced with the imminent storm, he could only be resigned to fate. He hadn't expected that the power of a sixth-order open heaven realm master would be so horrifying. While he was still shocked and dumbfounded, the proprietress exerted more force with her hand and hurled him away, which caused him to fall to the ground with a loud crash. Following that, she leapt off the wooden bed and pressed one hand against his chest to make sure that he was unable to resist. Then, with her other hand and two legs, she attacked him like raindrops falling from the sky. As she beat him up, she bellowed, "Little bastard, how dare you come back? How did you even have the gall to show your face here? Why didn't you just get yourself killed out there? Why did you have to come back?" Loud booms continuously rang out. Initially, Xianxia was still able to parry her attacks, but he was soon overwhelmed. Left with no choice, he curled up on the ground and covered his face with his hands as he silently endured the unfathomable assault. A long time later, The proprietress seemingly became exhausted as she fell on her backside. While she was weakly thumping Xianxia, she started bawling again. Anyone would understand that she was truly heartbroken by just hearing her cry. Her tears streamed down her face like pearls slipping off a string, as though she had suffered immense grievances. Xianxia lifted his head with a hideous expression. He wanted to curse, but upon seeing that she was in such a state, he couldn't bring himself to. Resentfully, he questioned, "Crazy woman, why did you beat me up?" He was well-meaning in his intent, coming all the way here to console her, but he had never expected that she would pin him to the floor and beat him. The fury in his heart couldn't be alleviated no matter what. In an abrupt manner, the proprietress stopped crying. While her tears were still sliding down her face, she stared at Xianxia and questioned darkly, "Did you just scold me?" Her vision appeared blurred, so it was apparent that she wasn't sober yet. "So what if I scolded you?" Xianxia yelled. Although he couldn't defeat her, it didn't mean he would meekly submit either. "Crazy woman! Crazy woman! Crazy woman!" The proprietress stared fixedly at him and put on a smile all of a sudden. Then she wrapped one hand around his neck and pulled him towards herself. Then she rubbed his head with her free hand. "Smelly brat, you're still the same." No one had ever rubbed Xianxia's head in such a way before, so he felt somewhat humiliated. Although he clenched his teeth and attempted to struggle out of her grip, he was unable to do so as he was going up against a sixth-order open heaven realm master. "Since you're back, don't ever leave again. Come drink with me," the proprietress yelled as she grabbed a wine jar. Regardless of whether Xianxia was willing to drink with her or not, she clenched his jaw and lifted his head a little before pouring the wine into his mouth. The cold liquid slid down Xianxia's throat, and he immediately felt a burning sensation overwhelm him. In just a moment, a full bottle of wine had been poured into his stomach. The next instant, Xianxia felt like his stomach was on fire and he began seeing stars. His only thought was that this wine was ridiculously strong. Even someone like him, who possessed a dragon vein, became intoxicated immediately, so it was no wonder that the proprietress was fully inebriated. This was obviously no ordinary wine. "I'm so happy you're back. Don't ever leave me again." The proprietress was laughing and crying at the same time, so it wasn't certain what had gotten into her. After making Xianxia chug a bottle of wine, she picked up a heavenly snow fruit and stuffed it into his mouth. "It's your favorite. Eat up," she muttered. "No, I don't like such bitter and sour fruit." Xianxia wanted to resist, but his body had turned limp because of the wine and his vision had become blurred, so the entire fruit was easily stuffed into his mouth by the proprietress. The next thing Xianxia knew, he was seeing double, then triple. Trying his hardest to stay conscious, he struggled out of the proprietress' arms and scrambled towards the door. In a drunken manner, he desperately called out, "Old Bai, save me." Not long after Xianxia started crawling, he felt a grip on his ankle. He reckoned that the proprietress must have grabbed him, and in the next instant, he was pulled backwards. "Let's drink." The proprietress pried his mouth open and poured another bottle of wine into his mouth. Soon, Xianxia felt the world spinning around him. A long time later, he opened his eyes as his mouth felt extremely dry while his throat was burning. At that instant, all he could see were pink bed curtains, which caused him to fall into a dazed state. A moment later, vague memories from the previous night sprang back into his mind. He recalled coming all the way here to check on the proprietress. Then he was beaten up by her. Following that, he was forced to down several bottles of wine before he passed out. His memory stopped at the moment when he was pulled backwards and forced to drink the second bottle. As for what happened next, he had not the slightest idea. Xianxia seriously wondered what kind of wine it was that was so strong it only took 2 bottles to knock him out. "Where am I?" After staring at the pink bed curtains for a long time, he came to his senses and realized that he was possibly lying on the proprietress' bed. After all, he remembered that these bed curtains were hung around her wooden bed. Feeling a piercing headache, Xianxia tried to rub his head to relieve the pain, but he soon realized that something was holding his arm down. After turning his head, he widened his eyes and instantly sobered up. At that moment, he felt extremely agitated. It wasn't a thing that had been pressed against his arm, it was the proprietress' head. Presently, she was lying beside him with her body curled up. She appeared to be having a sweet dream as there was a faint smile on her face. Xianxia had no idea how long she had remained in this posture, but he knew it was long enough for his arm to go numb. At that instant, his expression was transformed by horror. The situation he was in was terrifying. It wasn't that the proprietress was ugly. Far from it, in fact, as she was an alluring lady with a beautiful face and a curvy figure. Any man would have fallen head over heels for her and given anything for a chance to lie in her bed. The crux of the problem was that she was the proprietress. Xianxia had been tormented by her in the past few days, and when he came over to console her, she even beat him up. If she found out that not only had he climbed into her bed, but they had also snuggled for a long time, he would probably be skinned alive. Fortunately, she was still fully dressed while he, although somewhat disheveled and battered, was also wearing all his clothes. In other words, they didn't do anything when they were drunk, which allowed Xianxia to relax ever so slightly. The outcome wasn't the worst at the very least. If they had really done something more, his life would be over. Despite that, they were still in an intimate position. Anyone would have misunderstood them if they saw them lying on the same bed. Whatever the case, Xianxia reckoned that he'd better run away now. With his mind made up, he held his breath and carefully pulled out his arm from beneath her slender neck. Following that, he cautiously moved past her and got out of the bed. Looking around, he realized that wine bottles had been scattered everywhere, and the smell of alcohol still filled the air. Clenching his teeth, Xianxia recalled hearing from someone before that too much wine could easily lead to trouble. He had always been a disciplined man, so he would exercise moderation whenever he drank, which was why he had never gotten totally drunk before. After getting forced to down so many bottles of potent wine, he finally had a taste of true intoxication. Xianxia had no time to clean up the room, so after shooting a glance at the proprietress, who was still lying on the wooden bed, he clenched his fist at her and began tiptoeing out of the room. After gently opening the door, he dashed out of the room and carefully closed the door in silence. His behavior was that of a common thief, and if he hadn't been actively suppressing it, he would have heard his own heartbeat. When he was done, he was finally able to relax. He reckoned that he'd better stay as far away from this place as possible and return to his room quickly. As he rearranged his clothes, he took a leap forward and directly landed on the deck. Raising his head, he saw Bai Qi standing in front of him with a bucket of hot water in his hand. As their eyes met, Bai Qi became astounded. "You?" Xianxia was dumbfounded as well. He felt extremely guilty when he bumped into Bai Qi, so he hurriedly adjusted his collar and said, "Brother Bai, it seems that you're busy with work." And Bai Qi subconsciously nodded. "Good. Then, I'll be going back to my room now," Xianxia replied. Then he placed his hands behind his back and shuffled towards the cabin. A stunned Bai Qi watched him leave. Then he shifted his attention to the room on the top floor. The next instant, the bucket in his hand fell to the ground as the hot water splattered everywhere. As Xianxia pretended to be calm, he returned to his room and brushed away the cold sweat on his forehead. Not long after he was seated, he heard a loud boom coming from the door. Following that, 3 men charged into the room with gloomy expressions on their faces, their eyes seemingly filled with murderous intent. "What are you doing?" A shocked Xianxia stared vigilantly at Bai Qi, the accountant, and the chef, who were inching closer to him, as he slowly stepped backwards. Without uttering a word, the 3 men tacitly pounced on Xianxia and pinned him down. The accountant raised his golden abacus as though he was ready to strike, while a glint flashed across the chef's kitchen knife as he pointed it at Xianxia's head. Bai Qi even wrapped a white towel around Xianxia's neck twice and tightened it. Xianxia bellowed, "We can talk it out if you're not happy with me. Why must you resort to violence?" Bai Qi lowered his figure and stared at Xianxia as their faces almost came into contact. With a hideous expression, he said through gritted teeth, "Brat, I'll ask you some questions and you'd better answer me honestly. If you dare to lie, I'll kill you immediately." "Then ask." Xianxia nodded. There were 3 of them while he was on his own, so he was unable to defeat them. With bloodshot eyes, Bai Qi questioned, "Where were you last night?" "Where else could I be other than inside a room?" He wasn't lying, as he was indeed in a room, just not his room. "How dare you try to lie to us at this point?" "Show him what the consequences are." Bai Qi shot a glance at the chef, who then raised his kitchen knife. "Wait." A horrified Yang Kai finally realized that these guys were serious. He would be seriously injured if he was hacked by the knife. You should have treasured the chance I gave you. I'll ask you one more time. Where were you last night? Bai Qi yelled. An embarrassed Yang Kai felt speechless at that. You already saw. Why are you still asking me this question? What I saw might not be the truth. I want you to tell me yourself. Now, where were you last night? I was in the proprietress room. With a fawning smile, Yang Kai scratched his face and darted his gaze around. Right after he finished speaking, he felt that the towel around his neck became tighter, and a sharp knife was pressed against his head. Bai Qi had exerted more force with his hands, and with reddened eyes, he puffed out a hot breath through his nostrils and questioned, Did you do it? What do you mean? Yang Kai found it difficult to breathe as he thumped the other man's arms. I asked you whether you did it or not. Bai Qi asked again through clenched teeth. No, I did nothing. The proprietress and I did nothing. Yang Kai defended himself with difficulty. Is that true? Bai Qi didn't seem to believe him. That was because the sight he saw earlier made him fall into his wild thoughts. It was morning when Yang Kai dashed out of the proprietress room with disheveled clothes. So Bai Qi couldn't help thinking that something untoward might have happened between them. It's definitely true. Yang Kai hurriedly stuck out 3 fingers and swore to the heavens. Bai Qi examined him for a long time before the redness in his eyes faded. Then he pulled the towel away from Yang Kai's neck and stared fixedly at him. Tell us what happened. If you dare to lie to us, we'll never let you off. After finishing his words, he clenched both ends of the towel and straightened it. The accountant shook his golden abacus as the beads clacked with one another, while the chef swayed his kitchen knife as a cold glint flashed across it. Yang Kai covered his neck and coughed for a bit. With an apprehensive expression, he gazed at the 3 men in front of him and replied in a hushed voice, Actually, I don't know what happened either. You don't know? Bai Qi glared at him with a furious expression. Tell us what you do know then. A helpless Yang Kai briefly told them what had happened. Last night, upon hearing a woman's sobs that were coming from the top floor, he went over to have a look. After entering the proprietress room, he realized that she was the one crying, so he instinctively tried to console her. However, he hadn't expected to be forced to down 2 bottles of wine, whereupon he passed out. When he awakened, he realized that he was already lying on her bed. As for what had happened when he was unconscious, he really had no idea, and he wasn't able to recall it. Upon hearing this, the 3 of them traded glances and secretly communicated with one another using their divine senses. Old Bai, didn't you tell him not to bother the proprietress recently? The accountant asked. An embarrassed Bai Qi replied, I forgot. After he sent the heavenly snow fruits to the proprietress, I immediately turned on the barrier around my room, so I couldn't detect anything. The chef and the accountant nodded to mean that they had done the same. If Bai Qi hadn't messaged them earlier, they would have hidden in their rooms for one more day. With the kitchen knife in his hand, the chef stroked his chin and shot Yang Kai a look. Do you think we can trust him? Old Bai, you said that you saw him leaving the proprietress room with disheveled clothes and his behavior was stealthy. That's right. I personally saw it. Recalling the sight earlier, Bai Qi became incensed as he glared at Yang Kai. The accountant gave it a thought and said, I think we can believe what he has said. All of us have tried the proprietress wine before. We couldn't even take half a bottle before blacking out. If 2 bottles of wine were really forced down his throat, I guess he wouldn't be capable of anything else. Bai Qi and the chef nodded as they shuddered, recalling how strong the wine was. They never wanted to have a taste of it again. Everything is fine, then? The chef stared at them. The accountant nodded. I guess nothing had happened. I'll take my leave then, the chef said. The proprietress might awaken soon, so I'll prepare some hangover soup for her now. I still have some accounts to sort out. So I'll be leaving too, the accountant said and shuffled out of the room with the chef. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the 3 men were gone. Only Bai Qi was left standing there. Yang Kai was puzzled by the change in their attitude. Earlier, he saw them communicating with one another using divine senses and shooting him cold glances from time to time. He was quite unnerved. Regardless of what had happened, he had climbed into the proprietress' bed and slept beside her for a night. Even though he didn't do anything, it still wasn't righteous. He had come up with the answers to the questions Bai Qi and the others might ask him, but never expected to just leave like that. Bai Qi turned to look at him and nodded. It seems that it's just a misunderstanding. We've wrongly blamed you. Yang Kai nodded his head as well. Indeed, a misunderstanding. Bai Qi replied with a smile. Good. Why did you enter the proprietress room to console her now? Usually, around this time, we would just go into hiding and stay as far away from her room as possible. It seems I should be blamed for not informing you earlier. Hey, what are you doing? While he was speaking, he suddenly realized that Yang Kai had turned on the room's barrier and rose from the chair. Then, Yang Kai punched his right fist against his left palm as he stepped towards him with a hideous grin on his face. Bai Qi forced a harmless smile at him. Yang Kai, it's just a misunderstanding. Let the past be the past. Cultivators like us should look forward and move on. Don't hit my face. He directly squatted and covered his head. Misunderstanding? Misunderstanding, you say? You brought 2 partners into my room to interrogate me just because of a misunderstanding? Did you know how sharp the chef's kitchen knife was? If I hadn't shouted in time, he would have diced me into quarters. How dare you tell me it's just a misunderstanding? Yang Kai went on to beat Bai Qi to vent out the grievances he had suffered from in the proprietress room. After a long time, Bai Qi stood up straight in exasperation and bellowed, Enough. If you keep beating me up, I'll fight back. Do you seriously think I'm no match for you? I'm just restraining myself from making a move on you. Hearing that, Yang Kai directly landed a kick on him, which caused him to fall to the ground. How could you be so ruthless? Sometime later, Bai Qi, whose face was swollen and livid, was seated and rubbing his wounds as he glared at Yang Kai. This is nothing compared to how brutal the proprietress was. You deserved it. Bai Qi sneered. Then he gasped upon irritating his wounds. Does it hurt? Yang Kai stared at him and asked. An exasperated Bai Qi replied, What do you think? An elated Yang Kai cackled for a moment before he straightened his face and said in a hushed voice, I must ask you something. What? Bai Qi replied with displeasure. After pondering on how he should phrase the question, Yang Kai said, Do I look like someone who is close to the proprietress? Bai Qi froze. Then he pretended to be nonchalant and asked, What do you mean? Yang Kai replied with a frown, I have no idea. Then, he recalled what he had gone through in the proprietress room as some of the things she had said bothered him. At that time, she must have mistaken him for someone else, which was why she said that she was glad that he was back and that he should never leave again. Apparently, she thought she was speaking to someone close to her whom she hadn't met for a long time. Why would you ask this question if you have no idea? Bai Qi sized him up. Yang Kai didn't know how to explain it to him, so he replied vaguely. She just gave me a feeling that she had mistaken me for someone else. By the way, is she married? He thought that this crazy woman might have regarded him as her husband. No. Proprietress has many admirers, but she's never been interested in any one of them. I've also never seen her getting into a relationship with anyone. Bai Qi shook his head and tried to change the topic. What did she do that made you feel this way? Well, nothing much. She basically beat me up and then forced 2 bottles of wine down my throat. I don't know what happened next. Didn't she say anything? She told me not to leave again since I'd come back. Perhaps she was just spouting nonsense after getting drunk? Yang Kai nodded as that was the only reasonable explanation. After they remained silent for a moment, Bai Qi asked, Didn't you think about running away? What do you mean? Yang Kai turned to look at him in shock. Bai Qi explained, You were told to get some heavenly snow fruits from 9 nether continent. Did the idea of fleeing never cross your mind? No one was with you at that time. Where could I go? Yang Kai snorted. First In is immensely powerful and well-connected. So unless I go into hiding forever, I'll be exposed and get caught. By then, I'll end up in an even more miserable state. Then he suddenly understood something and stared at him with a frown. So, it was a test for me by letting me go to 9 nether continent on my own? Not really. You're also a part of First In now, so you're supposed to do something for the proprietress. Bai Qi chuckled. While they were speaking, the door was pushed open from the outside. The chef entered the room and put down a basket on the table. I've prepared some hangover soup. Take it to the proprietress when she awakens. Yang Kai batted his eyes for a moment before he came to his senses. Me. The chef shot him a glance. Who else? A guilty Yang Kai said, I don't want to go. Chef, can you take it to her? The chef refused. The proprietress has said that you're responsible for taking her 3 meals a day. I wouldn't dare to disobey her orders. Old Bai. Yang Kai turned to look at Bai Qi and pleaded with him. Bai Qi rose from the chair and patted his shoulder. I'm not supposed to help you. Whatever happens, though, you have my blessings. Before Yang Kai could say anything, Bai Qi shuffled out of the room with the chef. Left alone in the room, Yang Kai stared at the basket on the table and fell into a dilemma. He had no idea when the proprietress would awaken, but he reckoned that it wouldn't take long before that happened. After all, as the weaker cultivator, it had been half a day since he awakened, so there was no way the proprietress, a 6th-order open heaven realm master, would be knocked out for significantly longer. After just 1 hour, the bell in his room suddenly rang out. Yang Kai was frustrated at the sound of this bell. Since the proprietress told him to take her 3 meals a day and clean her room, Bai Qi had installed a bell, and whenever it rang, it meant that the proprietress was summoning him. If he ignored it, the bell would never stop ringing. Regardless of how reluctant he was, Yang Kai knew he had to face the music. After taking a deep breath, he picked up the basket and trudged towards the deck. Following that, he leapt onto the top floor and knocked on the door. Proprietress. The proprietress could be heard grunting in a languid manner. Yang Kai could even imagine what she looked like now. I'm entering now, he said and pushed the door open. He directly entered the inner room and lifted his head. Just like what he had expected, the proprietress was seated at her table as she propped up her forehead with her hand as she rubbed her temples. The room looked just as chaotic as when he left. Fruit pits and wine bottles were scattered everywhere, and the bed was a mess. Staring at the curvy figure before him, Yang Kai still couldn't believe that he had slept beside her, feeling extremely fortunate to have survived. At that moment, he wondered if she remembered what had happened last night, and whether she would find fault with him. With his heart filled with apprehension, Yang Kai stepped into the room and opened the lid before fishing out a bowl of soup from the basket. Then, he presented it to the proprietress and said, Chef has prepared some hangover soup for you. Drink it while it's warm. The proprietress grunted lethargically and closed her eyes before falling into her thoughts. A long time later, she pulled the bowl of hangover soup towards herself and picked up a spoon. After she puffed out some air to the spoon, she started drinking the soup. The way she drank soup was elegant. Although she was suffering from a hangover, she still hadn't forgotten her manners. In a way, she was oddly attractive. After drinking the soup for a while, she suddenly said, Give me a massage. Ha! Yang Kai was apprehensive when she suddenly said that, so he was unable to react to it. I'm suffering from a headache. Give me a massage. The proprietress raised her hand and pointed at her head. A speechless Yang Kai circled around her and started rubbing her temples from behind. As she continued drinking soup, she questioned, Why are you so obedient today? Yang Kai realized that he appeared overly guilty. That was because he wasn't sure if she remembered what had happened last night. So he quickly said, I just don't want to argue with you since you're hungover. As a woman, is it appropriate for you to get this drunk? After gulping silently, he then asked probingly, What if someone took advantage of you when you were unconscious? You would be unable to resist. That person would suffer a horrific death then, she replied dispassionately, but her tone sounded menacing enough. I'm saying what if? There are brazenly licentious people out there. You were pretty restrained at the very least. Yang Kai froze as he almost coughed up blood. After another hard gulp, he asked, You remember? If you remember, how could I not? She continued having her soup. But I don't remember much. Yang Kai wouldn't dare to utter one more word lest he say something wrong. It was said that silence was golden, so he decided to quietly rub her temples. Nevertheless, he felt so anxious that it was as if someone was pointing a blade at his back. Don't tell anyone what happened last night, the proprietress warned. Yang Kai secretly thought that he had already exposed the secret. He was threatened by Bai Qi and the others at that time, so he had no choice. However, he wouldn't dare to reveal that to her, so he nodded repeatedly. Of course, I won't tell anyone. After she was done with the soup, she said, Clean up the room and prepare some hot water for me. I want to take a bath. Without saying a word, Xianxia got to work. Soon, he finished cleaning up the room and left with the basket. A while later, he returned with a basin of hot water and poured it onto her bathtub. Suddenly, he realized that after the incident last night, he was unable to rebuke the proprietress anymore as he felt extremely guilty. Although he was bossed around like a servant, he didn't dare to get mad at her. While waiting outside the room, he heard the woman taking off her clothes, and following that, the sound of water splashing came from inside. However, he remained calm and collected as he didn't dare to have any wild thoughts about her. As he looked into the void, his mind drifted elsewhere. After she was done with the bath, Xianxia helped her dispose of the bath water. Fortunately, he didn't have to clean her clothes as she naturally didn't allow him to. A maidservant from First Inn was responsible for this particular chore. When the proprietress emerged from her room, she appeared radiantly attractive. Upon seeing that, Xianxia fell into a dazed state as though the woman before his eyes and the drunkard from last night were two different people. Xianxia watched attentively as the proprietress ambled towards the gunnel and looked out at the colorful and endless void. She seemed to have fallen into a dazed state as though she was pondering on something. Without disturbing her, Xianxia entered the room and got rid of the bath water she had just used. Then, he approached her and said, "Is there anything else you want me to do for you? If not, I'll excuse myself now." The proprietress didn't turn her head as she said, "The universe looks beautiful." Xianxia took a look and thought that the view was the same everywhere, so whether it was beautiful or not didn't matter. However, he wouldn't dare to respond like that, so he just remained standing behind her. A long time later, the proprietress waved her hand. "You may go now." After cupping his fists, Xianxia turned around and left. There were no more upheavals in the following journey. The only difference was that, since the incident, the proprietress seemed to have gone through some kind of transformation. She stopped staying in her room all the time and would frequently visit the cabin and have a drink and play some games with Bai Qi, the accountant, and the chef. Certainly, Xianxia wouldn't be spared from joining them. Bai Qi and the others were obviously used to this, while on the other hand, as a newcomer, Xianxia was forced to drink after losing the games for the first few times. Gradually, he became adept at the games and started gaining the upper hand. It could be said that Xianxia had finally seen the other side of the proprietress. As a sixth-order open heaven realm master, she could be considered incredibly amiable for being friendly to mere Emperor Realm juniors like them. One day, Xianxia was meditating in his room when the door was once again pushed open without his permission. It was Bai Qi who barged into his room. A speechless Xianxia stared at him. He had told him countless times that he should knock before entering the room, but this guy refused to remember. Xianxia even suspected that he was doing it intentionally. "I won't drink with you today." Xianxia waved his hand. He didn't mind joining them and having a drink once in a while. After all, as long as he wasn't given the proprietress special wine, he wouldn't get drunk. However, they had done it too frequently, so he was a little sick of it now. "We're not having a drink today. I'm here to take you somewhere." Bai Qi grinned. "Where?" Xianxia looked doubtfully at him. "A good place. Come with me." Bai Qi beckoned to him. Xianxia frowned, but his interest had been piqued because of how Bai Qi was acting. Since he had nothing to do, he decided to leave the room with him. Upon reaching the deck, Bai Qi shouted at the room on the top floor, "Proprietress, open the barrier." The proprietress didn't respond to him, but the next instant, a gap opened up at the light barrier, which had always surrounded the ship. Apparently, the proprietress was able to control it freely. "Let's go." Bai Qi took Xianxia's arm and shot forward. After they were gone, the gap was immediately sealed. Flying alongside Bai Qi, Xianxia turned his head and asked, "Where are we going?" There, Bai Qi pointed in a particular direction. Xianxia looked in the same direction and soon became amazed. That was because there was a building that looked like a palace in this endless void. The palace didn't look special, but it was obviously massive. Furthermore, it faintly radiated a golden glow. "What is that?" Xianxia asked curiously. "Haha, you'll find out about it when we reach our destination." Bai Qi kept up his mysterious act. Xianxia pursed his lips and stopped asking. He reckoned that Bai Qi wouldn't harm him, so he decided to just wait and see. After flying for 1 hour, they finally arrived at the palace. While they were still far away from the building earlier, Xianxia had already seen many people moving around inside this palace, which made the place look bustling. Furthermore, a giant stone had been erected beside the main entrance, and a character had been engraved on it. Universe was intricately carved on the stone, with strokes resembling soaring dragons and flying phoenixes. Obviously, it was a work by a master carver. Is this a universe temple? Xianxia suddenly recalled what Bai Qi had told him before, which was why he attempted such a guess.
Bai Qi grinned. You're a clever brat. That's right. This is a universe temple. Why did we come here all of a sudden? Bai Qi replied, Proprietress told me to bring you to this place so you can leave your imprint here. It'll be easier for you if you want to come back here in the future that way.
Although you're a master of the Tao of space and you're able to use a kind of teleportation, the void is extremely vast. Therefore, the universe transference law is more useful for traveling around. An elated Xianxia said, I'll have to thank her, then. He was already deathly curious when Bai Qi told him about universe transference law and universe transference seal some time ago in the inn. He wanted to visit those universe temples as quickly as possible, but he had no idea where they were. He hadn't expected that he would see one so soon. A moment later, the duo landed in front of the universe temple. Although it was called a temple, it was much larger than any palace Xianxia had ever seen before. Moreover, he saw many cultivators exiting the temple, with no one entering the place like Hao and Bai Qi were doing. After giving it a thought, Xianxia realized that this wasn't so strange. These cultivators could reach this temple by using the universe transference law, so they didn't have to fly in from the outside. On the other hand, he had to go in this way because he had never left his imprint in this temple before. Xianxia reckoned that many first-timers had to do the same. Two guards, who were clad in golden armor, stood on both sides of the entrance.
One of these imposing men was holding a spear while the other one had a sword in his hand. Bai Qi secretly spoke to Xianxia via divine sense. Universe temples are jointly operated by the 36 cave heavens and 72 paradises, so these guards are also from these top forces.
They're all very arrogant, so don't say anything later. I'll handle everything. Xianxia nodded to indicate that he understood him. Then, he secretly sized up the guards and realized that they were both open heaven realm masters. He was shocked by the revelation as these top forces made open heaven realm masters act as door guards. What kind of top cultivator was in charge of this temple? He reckoned that the person must be as powerful as the proprietress at the very least. It was no wonder that no one would dare to make a scene here. Who would have the guts to do that if they were not strong enough?
Those who were capable of doing so also wouldn't attempt to offend those cave heavens and paradises. It wouldn't be fun to be hunted down by them if they joined forces. The open heaven realm master on the left, who was holding a sword, stared at Bai Qi and Xianxia as he bellowed, "What is your business here?" With a smile, Bai Qi cupped his fists at him. "Sir, my friend wants to leave an imprint here.
Please permit us to pass." The person turned his head and swept a glance over Xianxia. There was no emotion on his face, as he had probably seen countless people who were just like Xianxia. In a dispassionate tone, he said, "You know the rules, right?" Bai Qi nodded repeatedly. I know. Then he presented a space ring to the guard. The person took it and gently tossed it into the air before scanning it with his divine sense. Then, he nodded his head. "Come with me." Upon finishing his words, he led the way for them. Bai Qi called out to Xianxia as they hurriedly followed along. As they were walking behind the cultivator in golden armor, a puzzled Xianxia asked, "Why did we have to give him some benefits for leaving an imprint in this temple?" Bai Qi shot him a glare. "Don't say that." Seeing that the open heaven realm master in front of them didn't react in any way, he secretly spoke to Xianxia in his mind. "Why do you think those from the cave heavens and paradises decided to occupy these universe temples? Was it because they wanted to make life more convenient for everyone?"
"If you want to leave an imprint, you have to pay a fee." "How much is it?" 100,000, a shocked Xianxia said, "So expensive." He couldn't believe that they needed 100,000 open heaven pills to leave an imprint here. In comparison, a third-order material cost about 150,000 pills. This was a lot of money for most people, and most Emperor Realm Masters couldn't afford it. 100,000 also wasn't a small amount of money for low-rank Open Heaven Masters. At that moment, Xianxia recalled something and asked with a frown, You said that in this universe, there are universe temples in every great territory. Some of them even have multiple temples. Does every temple charge a separate fee? That's right. However, the price is fixed. We have to pay 100,000 pills for every imprint we want to leave behind. Xianxia gasped upon hearing that. In that case, a cultivator had to spend a substantial amount of money just to leave a brand in these universe temples. However, taking one's safety into consideration, these expenses were inevitable. After all, compared to wealth, a person's life was obviously more important. If someone was unable to escape from his or her enemies, he or she could use the universe transference law to reach any universe temple, which was one of the greatest safety charms in life in that kind of situation. Those who weren't willing to spend money on it would be hunted down and killed. It's such a good way to make money, Xianxia lamented. If a cultivator decided to leave behind an imprint in 10 different universe temples throughout his life, he would have to fork out 1 million pills. There were countless cultivators in the 3,000 worlds, and everyone would attempt to have some measures to keep themselves safe. Moreover, the rich would certainly leave behind their imprint in more than 10 temples, so the amount of money they would end up spending was astronomical. These universe temples were basically money trees for the cave heavens and paradises. As long as these temples were not destroyed, countless pills would flow into their pockets without any effort on their side. Haha! That's why they have joined forces to manage these places. No single great force can monopolize such a big business. Bai Qi grinned. As they moved forward, they continued chatting. Xianxia realized that there were quite a lot of shops in this temple, and most of them were crammed with customers. As he watched these people move around, Xianxia had a feeling that this place was just like a city. Although it wasn't as lively as a real city, it was a rare sight to see so many people in this void. After giving it a thought, Xianxia realized that it wasn't so surprising. The people who had come to this place using the universe transference law must want to take a rest upon arrival. Some of them might even be forced to come here as they were hunted down by their enemies, so they needed a break. That was why this place was filled with people. Businesses flourished when people gathered together in the same place. Nevertheless, fighting was forbidden in any universe temple. Therefore, even though there were many cultivators around, it was a very safe place. While the cultivator in golden armor was leading the way, Bai Qi and Xianxia followed him and communicated with one another. Xianxia also regarded this as a chance to do some sightseeing. Soon, they reached a secluded room. The cultivator in golden armor stopped in his tracks and turned around. Go in. After you reach into the array and leave behind an imprint, you can come out. Bai Qi patted his shoulder. You might feel a little uncomfortable as this is your first time, but don't worry. I'll be waiting out here for you. In response, Xianxia simply nodded his head. The cultivator in golden armor fished out a token and unlocked the barrier around the secret room, whereupon Xianxia pushed the door open and entered. After Xianxia entered the secluded room, the door was closed once again. He couldn't see anything as it was pitch dark inside. While he was puzzled, he suddenly saw a light expanding right in front of him. After a glance, he realized that the floor had lit up as a complicated and massive array was gradually outlined. Knowing what was going on, he strode towards the center of the array. As soon as he stopped in his tracks, a buzzing sound could be heard, which suggested that the array was now operating. A faint pull could be felt coming from the array, and upon that realization, Xianxia hurriedly performed a hand seal and focused his mind. Clearly feeling that his own aura was attracted to the array, he reckoned that it was trying to record some of his unique information. The buzzing sound was continuously heard as the array continued running. A long time later, the buzzing sound slowly died down, and the light of the array faded. Eventually, the room became completely dark again. After carefully sensing it, Xianxia realized that a connection had been established between somewhere in the temple and him. However, he wasn't sure how to make use of that connection as he had never learned the universe transference law. Judging from what had happened though, he should have successfully left behind an imprint. In fact, he was curious about what the universe transference seal looked like. He thought that he would see it after entering the room, but it was nowhere in sight. Instead, he only came into contact with this array. Since the seal wasn't around, there was nothing else he could do. After pacing around in the room for a while, Xianxia realized that there was nothing special, so he pushed the door open and left. Bai Qi asked, "How was it?" "No problems." Xianxia didn't feel any discomfort like what Bai Qi had described, figuring it had something to do with the fact that he was a master of the Tao of space. Those who couldn't use space principles might feel uncomfortable when they came here for the first time. Good. Bai Qi heaved a sigh of relief before turning to cup his fists at the cultivator in golden armor. "Many thanks, sir." That person nodded dispassionately. "Fighting is forbidden inside the Universe Temple. Violate the rules and you will be executed." After finishing his words, he sealed off the room and turned around to leave. He was only responsible for bringing Xianxia to this place to leave his imprint, not caring about the rest. As for when Xianxia and Bai Qi would leave, it was up to them, as those from the Universe Temple wouldn't interfere with that. "Let's buy some stuff while we're here," Bai Qi said, and took Xianxia's arm before walking in a particular direction. He seemed familiar with the routes, so it was apparently not his first time here. There were all sorts of things that Bai Qi had to buy, obviously purchasing supplies for the inn, so Xianxia followed him and looked around. "After leaving an imprint here, you'll have to cultivate the universe transference law. Once you've learned it, you'll be able to come here as you please. Of course, the prerequisite is that you're in the same great territory. However, you have to remember that you must be within a safe distance. Once the universe transference law is used, you'll directly come to this place. Given your cultivation now, if the distance is too far away, you won't be able to take the strain and might even be crushed to death." Xianxia nodded to indicate he understood. "There's one more thing you have to remember. There's a delay after you use the universe transference law, so it's not like you can use it to flee immediately. You have to take the delay into consideration. If you're being hunted down by your enemies in the future, don't use it in front of them, otherwise you'll be killed before you can escape. You must only use it in a safe place." Xianxia asked, "How long is the delay?" He had to have a clear idea about it. Bai Qi shot him a glance. "Given your cultivation now, about 5 to 6 breaths. Certainly, the more powerful your cultivation is, the shorter the delay becomes. However, it's impossible to eliminate." "Who should I learn this universe transference law from?" Xianxia asked. "I'll teach you later." Bai Qi grinned. "But you'll have to pay me a fee." Hearing that, Xianxia immediately covered his space ring and replied vigilantly, "I have no money." He still owed the proprietress 10 million pills, so who knew when he would be able to clear his debt. Bai Qi said, "It's fine even if you have no money. You even snatched that golden crow corpse from the golden crow divine palace. So you must have some sun's true fires or even sun's true golds on you." As he spoke, he winked at Xianxia. "Nonsense." Xianxia replied resolutely. "Don't be such a stingy man. I'm not picky at all. So you can just give me a random sun's true fire. Forget it. I'll ask the proprietress to teach me the universe transference law. Your help is not needed." Bai Qi was speechless at that. 1 hour later, they flew out of the universe temple and returned to the ship. The first inn's ship was still anchored for them at a nearby place, so after they landed on the deck, the proprietress summoned them to find out how things went. Upon learning that they had achieved their goal, she said nothing more and simply waved her hand to motion for them to leave. Before that, though, she tossed a jade slip at Xianxia. "Since you've left behind an imprint, you'll have to study the universe transference law. You're an expert in the Tao of space, so this secret technique shouldn't be difficult for you to master. Go and cultivate it now." Xianxia thanked her and left the room with Bai Qi. After closing the door, Xianxia showed him the jade slip in his hand with a smug smile on his face. Seeing that, Bai Qi appeared frustrated. For the following 10 or so days, Xianxia stayed in his room to cultivate the universe transference law. Just like what the proprietress had said, it wasn't difficult for him to learn this technique. After all, he was already familiar with space principles. Technically speaking, the universe transference law was also a kind of space secret technique. However, one had to rely on the universe transference seal to use it. Anyone could use the secret technique without being a master of the Tao of space, which was why it was attractive. It would take the average person half a year or more to learn the secret technique, but Xianxia only needed slightly more than 10 days to do so. If it weren't because it wasn't convenient for him, he would have loved to try out the secret technique. Although he had no chance to give it a try, when he activated the universe transference law, He could clearly feel that there was a connection between the Universe Temple and himself. However, at the most critical moment, he would cut off the connection lest he really be transferred to the temple. The ship continued moving forward, but it wasn't certain where their destination was. 1 month after they left the original location of First Inn, a loud buzzing sound was suddenly heard as the entire ship shook violently. A flabbergasted Yang Kai dashed towards the deck, only to see that Bai Qi, the chef, and the accountant were already there. The proprietress was standing at the bow with a solemn expression as she performed a seal with one hand, her power fluctuating around her. "What's going on?" Yang Kai asked in a hushed voice. Bai Qi replied, "Don't worry, we're just passing through a territory gate." It was then that Yang Kai realized that they had reached a territory gate as the ship slowly entered it. He had passed through several territory gates in the past, but he was protected by Asun's Jade White Fox for those times. Except for the last time when the Jade White Fox ran out of energy, which made the journey become slightly dangerous for them, his other attempts were uneventful. However, he hadn't expected that it would cause so much commotion when the ship was passing through a territory gate, which made him think that they were confronted by some formidable enemies. "Are we going to a different great territory?" Yang Kai was shocked. "I think so," Bai Qi nodded. Judging from what he had just said, it seemed that he had no idea where their destination was either. The gigantic ship had to endure increased pressure when passing through the territory gate. Fortunately, the proprietress was a 6th-order Open Heaven Realm Master, so they were not worried at all. A moment later, the entire ship entered the territory gate. With the protection of the light barrier, they didn't feel any pressure. Looking around, Yang Kai realized that the view around him kept changing in an odd yet captivating manner. After just a short while, the entire ship shook suddenly and became stabilized. The view around them looked just like any other in the void. Apparently, they had left the territory gate and arrived at a different great territory. The proprietress seemed exhausted after navigating the ship through the territory gate, so she returned to her room and took a rest while Yang Kai was dragged away by Bai Qi to have a drink and play games with the chef and the accountant. A few days later, Yang Kai left the ship with Bai Qi and headed to another universe temple. After the first time, he already became familiar with the process, so he soon left his imprint. The ship continued moving forward. From time to time, Bai Qi would bring Yang Kai to the nearby universe temples. After 7 to 8 times, Yang Kai became embarrassed, and when returning to the ship, he asked, "Old Bai, have I held all of you up?" Bai Qi turned to look at him with a grin. "Have you only realized it now?" An abashed Yang Kai said, "If it weren't because of me, all of you could have used the universe transference law and arrived at those universe temples in an instant. The ship isn't even needed." "That's right, however, you're now a part of First Inn. In that case, we can't possibly leave you behind." Yang Kai pressed his lips together. "Is this the proprietress' order?" Bai Qi nodded. "Of course. Seems she really is kind-hearted." Yang Kai scratched his head. "She spent 800,000 pills for me to leave an imprint in those temples." Bai Qi gazed at him and batted his eyes. "Do you think proprietress was paying the fees for you?" A stunned Yang Kai asked. "Isn't that the case?" Bai Qi grinned. "Proprietress said that she's just lending you the money. You'll have to pay her back in the future." "What?" Yang Kai was astonished. "So, I'm the one who has to pay those fees?" "Of course." Bai Qi winked at him. Yang Kai became rooted to the spot. He thought that the proprietress had paid the fees for him, but he hadn't expected it to be nothing more than a loan. At that instant, he felt his face twitching. Seeing that, Bai Qi said, "If you're reluctant to spend the money, we don't have to stop the ship whenever we pass by a universe temple." "Of course I want to go to those universe temples," Yang Kai said through clenched teeth. Certainly, he had to visit those temples as they might save his life in the future. Even if he didn't come across any danger, he could use them to reach his destination faster. He already had a substantial debt anyway, so it didn't matter for him to spend 100,000 more for each temple. Compared to the 10 million he owed already, this was practically nothing. Half a year had passed just like this, and after passing through 4 great territories, they finally arrived at their destination. Upon learning the news,
An excited Bai Qi dragged Yang Kai towards the deck and pointed at a spirit province in the distance. Brat, do you know where this is? Yang Kai replied, How would I know? He was still exploring the outer universe that he was unfamiliar with, which was why he had no idea where they were. Looking to the side, he realized that the proprietress was just standing at the gunwale, her dress gently flapping in the wind, a faint smile on her face. Apparently, she also became extremely bored after doing nothing for half a year. So now that they had finally arrived at their destination, she became cheerful. Yang Kai ambled forward and stopped in a spot that wasn't far away from the proprietress. Is that our destination? The proprietress tucked her hair behind her ear and nodded her head. You're right. That's our destination. Where is this? It took the ship half a year to pass through several territory gates to finally reach this place, so Yang Kai was curious. That's the star city of this great territory. Bai Qi approached him with an excited expression and asked, Brat, have you heard of star cities? He thought that Yang Kai had never heard of such a place before. Yang Kai's gaze brightened. That's a star city? He couldn't help looking in that direction, but he couldn't see what was going on over there due to the great distance. Moreover, the spirit province seemed to have been surrounded by a grand array, so all he could see was a blurred area. Zhang Ruoshi told him that if he wanted to learn anything about the world tree, his best option was to visit a star city. That was because such places were where people from all walks of life in the outer universe gathered together. With so many people coming and going, a lot of information could be traded for along with many precious items. Perhaps he could find out where the world tree was in such a place. Unfortunately, right after he arrived in the 3000 worlds, he was brought to Seven Wonders Land to become a worker. Then, he roamed around the universe for a while before arriving at First Inn. He had no time to look for a star city, nor did he have any idea where one was. He hadn't expected that the proprietress' destination was actually a star city. You already know about them? Bai Qi was shocked. I've heard of them before. Yang Kai nodded, and then he turned to look at the proprietress. Will we stay there for the long term? First Inn was destroyed during a battle, so they had to look for a new place to settle down. There was no way they had spent half a year coming all the way here just to buy supplies, so they would most likely stay there. For the time being, the proprietress nodded. Noticing the excitement on his face, she flashed a smile at him. You seem interested in the Star City. Yang Kai replied, I've never seen one before, so of course I'm curious. The proprietress said with a smile, there's nothing special about it. The world you're from must have many different shopping districts and trade cities. A star city is just a bigger, higher-level type of shopping district. The things on sale are also more expensive. Yang Kai nodded his head and looked forward again. He was pondering whether he should ask the proprietress about the world tree. After all, Firsten engaged in the business of collecting information. If the world tree really existed, the proprietress must be aware of it. After giving it a thought, though, he decided not to. He would just ask around after reaching the city. Bai Qi, the chef, and the accountant were having a chat amongst themselves on the deck, and a salacious look adorned Bai Qi's face. 1 hour later, the ship arrived at a dock in the periphery of the Spirit Province. There were quite a few cultivators guarding the dock. Their leader was clad in golden armor and had a long sword sheathed at his waist. He looked just like an imposing general. After the ship stopped at the dock, the golden armor general led a group of cultivators and boldly jumped onto the deck. With his hand resting on his sword, he swept a glance over them in an imposing manner. A soldier in silver armor stepped forward and yelled, "Identify yourselves and present documents." The proprietress hinted at Bai Qi, who then moved forward and passed a jade slip to the soldier in silver armor. After scanning it with his divine sense, the soldier became surprised and presented the jade slip to the golden armor general. After reading it, the general nodded gently. "So it is Firsten's, madam. I apologize for failing to recognize you earlier." The proprietress kept a faint smile on her face. "General, you're responsible for guarding an important place like the Star City's dock, so you must be swamped with work. It's understandable that you didn't recognize me." While they were speaking, Bai Qi put on a smile and passed a space ring to the soldier in silver armor. At this point, the proprietress said, "All of you have worked hard. Please take this gift from me and buy some refreshments for yourselves." The soldier didn't know how to handle the space ring as he looked inquisitively at the golden armor general. The general said with a smile, since it's a gift from Madame Lan, just accept it. It was only then that the soldier set his mind at ease and stored the space ring before cupping his fists to the proprietress. The golden armor general went on to say, Madame Lan, it's just the usual practice, so please don't pay it any mind. Then, he passed the jade slip back to Bai Qi and led them to leave the ship. Following that, he waved his hand. Let them pass! Then, the barrier at the dock slowly opened and the proprietress thanked him before sailing the ship towards the spirit province. Aboard the ship, Xianxia was amazed by what had just happened. It was apparent that the proprietress had a wide network. She might not know the golden armor general, but after she fished out a simple jade slip, the general could immediately recognize that she was First In's Madame Lan, which suggested that she was truly famous in the outer universe. It wasn't surprising, as she could be considered a powerful cultivator as a sixth-order open heaven realm master. Furthermore, she was a charming lady, so she could easily attract others' attention. However, there was one thing that Xianxia didn't understand, so he approached Bai Qi and asked in a small voice, why are there so many soldiers in the periphery of the Star City? Is this city not safe? Would anyone invade this place? Bai Qi replied, no one would dare to do so. This Star City is the property of Great Battle Heaven. The Golden Armor General and the soldier in silver armor are all from Great Battle Heaven. They keep guard on the dock because that allows them to control the entire Star City. Secondly, they have to fend off space beasts. Have you seen space beasts before? Is the myriad facets insect considered a space beast? The only space beast Xianxia had come across was the myriad facets insect, which caused Zhang Ruoxi and him to be separated at that time. Until this day, he still had no idea where she was. Nevertheless, she had inherited some memories from her ancestor, so she had a better understanding of the outer universe than he did. In the light of that, Xianxia felt he didn't have to worry about her. If he wasn't mistaken, she must have headed to Langya Paradise. After all, that was the place where her ancestor was born. Yes, it can be considered a space beast. However, myriad facets insects are basically harmless. Some space beasts love places that are bustling with noise and activity, and they're all generally quite powerful. If they manage to barge into a star city, they can cause a lot of damage. With the soldiers guarding the dock, these space beasts normally wouldn't dare to make a scene. Upon hearing his explanation, Xianxia went on to ask, you just mentioned Great Battle Heaven. Is it one of the 36 cave heavens? He recalled seeing the name in the jade slip given to him by Meng Hong, who was a disciple from Great Moon Province. That's right. The first universe temple you visited was guarded by those from Great Battle Heaven as well. They're easily recognizable as they're just like an army. They live by military rules and they're divided by ranks. They're a bunch of rough people. Xianxia grunted. It's no wonder proprietress called him general. Bai Qi grinned. A general is in fact a mid-rank open heaven realm master. That guy is supposed to be a great general in the 5th order open heaven realms. There are also great generals in the 4th order or 6th order open heaven realm. A grand marshal is someone who is one rank above them. Interesting. Xianxia was amazed. Then he changed the topic. By the way, which great force is First In from? Although it had been half a year since he joined First In, he still had no idea which great force was behind the inn. Nevertheless, he was certain that it had to be one of the cave heavens or paradises. Go ask proprietress, Bai Qi grinned. Xianxia shot him a glare as he had the urge to rip his mouth off. While they were speaking, the ship arrived at the spirit province where the Star City was located. After the ship passed through the clouds, an abundance of world energy came right at them, which prompted Xianxia to take a deep breath. They had been roaming around the void for a long time. When he finally reached such a place, he felt like a wanderer who had finally found a place to settle down. The spirit province couldn't be considered expansive. Looking from above, one could see the end of it at a glance. It was the equivalent of a few major cities combined. However, one could see that the entire spirit province was full of different styles of buildings. The clean and wide streets crisscrossed one another like the pattern on a chessboard. The streets were also lit up by beautiful lights. On the ground, countless people could be seen moving around. In the sky, some people could be seen flying around from time to time. There were also some uniquely shaped flight-type artifacts. Seeing that, Xianxia fell into his thoughts. It seemed that flying wasn't prohibited in this place, which was a friendly practice. Many cities and forces erected flight inhibiting arrays which prevented anyone from flying. After the ship moved forward for about a quarter hour, the proprietress called out, "Disembark now." Upon hearing that, the people on the deck flew up. The proprietress performed a set of hand seals as her energy fluctuated around her, whereupon the ship began shrinking rapidly and soon became an item the size of a palm. Following that, she hid it in her sleeve. "Let's go," she said, and landed on the ground, followed by those from First In. There were over 10 people that worked for First In, a number that was neither big or small. Besides Bai Qi, the accountant, and the chef, whom Xianxia was already familiar with, the rest of them were general workers. After all, it didn't require a lot of people to run an inn. 10 people were more than sufficient. A moment later, the group reached a shop, but it wasn't certain what was sold here as there was no signboard. It was in a prime location, however, as it was at the intersection of some streets. There were a lot of people moving around. The proprietress looked around and nodded gently before walking inside. Soon, an elderly man approached her and cupped his fists. "Greetings, madam. This one is Yuan Rueda." The elderly man was an open heaven realm master, but he wasn't very strong. Although he was old, he was still respectful to the proprietress. In response, the proprietress nodded her head. Yuan Rueda said, "You must be exhausted. Do you need to take a rest?" The proprietress waved her hand. "There's no need for that. Let's get down to business now." "Good. Have a seat, please." Yuan Rueda extended his hand. After Madame Lan was seated, he fished out a jade slip and passed it to her. "This is the title deed of this shop. Everything has been settled." The proprietress took it and briefly scanned it before storing it. Then, Yuan Rueda fished out another jade slip. "This contains the information of the businesses under those great forces, including the shop names and the top cultivators that work in those shops." After that, he took out one more jade slip. "This one contains the information about the shopkeepers and the shop hands in those shops.